Mahabharata, Book 14, Aswamedika Parva. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 1. O.M. Having bowed down unto Narayana, and Nara the foremost of male beings, and unto the goddess Sarasvati, must the word Jaya be uttered. Vyasa said, after the king Dhritarashtra had offered libations of water unto the manes of Bhisma, the mighty-armed Yudhishthira, with his senses bewildered, placing the former in his front, ascended the banks of the river, his eyes suffused with tears, and dropped down on the bank of the Ganga like an elephant pierced by the hunter. Then, incited by Krishna, Bhima took him up sinking. This must not be so, said Krishna, the grinder of hostile hosts. The Pandavas, O king, saw Yudhishthira, the son of Dharma, troubled and lying on the ground, and also sighing again and again. And seeing the king despondent and feeble, the Pandavas, overwhelmed with grief, sat down, surrounding him. And endowed with high intelligence and having the sight of wisdom, King Dhritarashtra, exceedingly afflicted with grief for his sons, addressed the monarch, saying, Rise up, O thou tiger among the Kurus. Do thou now attend to thy duties? O Kunti's son, thou hast conquered this earth according to the usage of the Kshatriyas. Do thou now, O Lord of men, enjoy her with thy brothers and friends. O foremost of the righteous, I do not see why thou shouldst grieve. O Lord of the earth, having lost 100 sons like unto riches obtained in a dream, it is Gandhari and I, who should mourn. Not having listened to the pregnant words of the high-souled Vidura, who sought our welfare, I, of perverse senses, now repent. The virtuous Vidura, endowed with divine insight, had told me, Thy race will meet with annihilation owing to the transgressions of Duryodhana. O king, if thou wish for the weal of thy line, act up to my advice. Cast off this wicked-minded monarch, Suryodhana, and let not either Karna or Sakuni by any means see him. Their gambling too do thou, without making any fuss suppress, and anoint the righteous king Yudhishthira. That one of subdued senses will righteously govern the earth. If thou wouldst not have King Yudhishthira, son of Kunti, then, O monarch, do thou, performing a sacrifice, thyself take charge of the kingdom, and regarding all creatures with an even eye, O Lord of men, do thou let thy kinsmen, O thou advancer of thy kindred, subsist on thy bounty. When, O Kunti's son, the far-sighted Vidura said this, fool that I followed the wicked Duryodhana. Having turned a deaf ear to the sweet speech of that sedate one, I have obtained this mighty sorrow as a consequence, and have been plunged in an ocean of woe. Behold thy old father and mother, O king, plunged in misery. But, O master of men, I find no occasion for thy grief. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 2. Vyasa said, thus addressed by the intelligent King Dhritarashtra, Yudhishthira, possessed of understanding, became calm. And then Kesava, Krishna, accosted him, if a person indulges excessively in sorrow for his departed forefathers, he grieves them. Therefore, banishing grief, do thou, now, celebrate many a sacrifice with suitable presents to the priests, and do thou gratify the gods with soma liquor, and the manes of thy forefathers with their due food and drink. Do thou also gratify thy guests with meat and drink, and the destitute with gifts commensurate with their desires. A person of thy high intelligence should not bear himself thus. What ought to be known hath been known by thee, what ought to be done hath also been performed. And thou hast heard the duties of the Kshatriyas, recited by Bhishma, the son of Bhagirathi, by Krishna, Dwaipayana, Narada, and Vidura. Therefore thou shouldst not walk the way of the stupid, but pursuing the course of thy forefathers, sustain the burthen of the empire. It is meet that a Kshatriya should attain heaven for certain by his own renown. Of heroes, those that came to be slain never shall have to turn away from the celestial regions. Renounce thy grief, O mighty sovereign. Verily, what hath happened was destined to happen so. Thou canst in no wise see those that have been slain in this war. Having said this unto Yudhishthira, prince of the pious, the high-spirited Govinda paused, and Yudhishthira answered him thus, O Govinda, full well do I know thy fondness for me. Thou hast ever favored me with thy love and thy friendship. And, O holder of the mace and the discus, O scion of Yedu's race, O glorious one, if, now, with a pleased mind thou dost permit me to go to the ascetic's retreat in the woods, then thou wouldst compass what is highly desired by me. Peace find I none after having slain my grandfather, and that foremost of men, Karna, who never fled from the field of battle. Do thou, O Janardana, so order that I may be freed from this heinous sin, and that my mind may be purified. As Pritha's son was speaking thus, the highly energetic Vyasa, cognizant of the duties of life, soothing him, spoke these excellent words, My child, thy mind is not yet calmed, and therefore thou art again stupefied by a childish sentiment. And wherefore, O child, do we over and over again scatter our speech to the winds? Thou knowest duties of the Kshatriyas, who live by warfare. A king that hath performed his proper part should not suffer himself to be overwhelmed by sorrow. Thou hast faithfully listened to the entire doctrine of salvation, and I have repeatedly removed thy misgivings arising out of desire. But not paying due heed to what I have unfolded, thou of perverse understanding hast doubtless forgotten it clean. Be it not so. Such ignorance is not worthy of thee. O sinless one, thou knowest all kinds of expiation, and thou hast also heard of the virtues of kings as well as the merits of gifts. Wherefore then, O Bharata, acquainted with every morality and versed in all the agamas, art thou overwhelmed with grief as if from ignorance? Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 3. Vyasa said, O Yudhishthira, thy wisdom, I conceive, is not adequate. None doth any act by virtue of his own power. It is God who engageth him and acts good or bad, O bestower of honor. Where then is the room for repentance? Thou deemest thyself as having perpetrated impious acts. Do thou, therefore, O Bharata, hearken as to the way in which sin may be removed. O Yudhishthira, those that commit sins can always free themselves from them through penance, sacrifice, and gifts. O king, O foremost of men, sinful people are purified by sacrifice, austerities, and charity. The high-souled celestials and asuras perform sacrifices for securing religious merit, and therefore sacrifice are of supreme importance. It is through sacrifices that the high-souled celestials had waxed so wondrously powerful, and having celebrated rites did they vanquish the Danavas. Do thou, O Yudhishthira, prepare for the Rajasuya and the horse sacrifice, as well as, O Bharata, for the Sarvamita and the Naramita. And then, as Dasaratha's son, Rama, or as Dashmanta's and Sakuntala's son, thy ancestor, the Lord of the earth, the exceedingly puissant King Bharata, had done, do thou agreeably to the ordinance celebrate the horse sacrifice with dakshinas. Yudhishthira replied, Beyond a doubt, the horse sacrifice purifieth princes. But I have a purpose of which it behoveth thee to hear. Having caused this huge carnage of kindred, I cannot, O best of the regenerate ones, dispense gifts even on a small scale. I have no wealth to give. Nor can I for wealth solicit these juvenile sons of kings, staying in sorry plight, with their wounds yet green, and undergoing suffering. How, O foremost of twice-born ones, having myself destroyed the earth, can I, overcome by sorrow, levy dues for celebrating a sacrifice? Through Duryodhana's fault, O best of ascetics, the kings of the earth have met with destruction, and we have reaped ignominy. For wealth Duryodhana hath wasted the earth, and the treasury of that wicked-minded son of Dhritarashtra is empty. In this sacrifice, the earth is the dakshina. This is the rule that is prescribed in the first instance. The usual reversal of this rule, though sanctioned, is observed by the learned as such. Nor, O ascetic, do I like to have a substitute for this process. In this matter, O reverend sir, it behoveth thee to favor me with thy counsel. Thus addressed by Pritha's son, Krishna Dwaipayana, reflecting for a while, spoke unto the righteous king, this treasury, now, exhausted, shall be full. O son of Pritha, in the mountain Himavat, the Himalayas, there is gold which had been left behind by Brahmanas at the sacrifice of the high-souled Maruta. Yudhishthira asked, how in that sacrifice celebrated by Maruta was so much gold amassed? And, O foremost of speakers, when did he reign? Vyasa said, if, O Pritha's son, thou art anxious to hear concerning that king sprung from the Karandama race, then listen to me as I tell thee when that highly powerful monarch possessed of immense wealth reigned. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 4. Yudhishthira said, O righteous one, I am desirous of hearing the history of that royal sage Maruta. Do thou, O Dwaipayana, relate this unto me, O sinless one. Vyasa said, O child, in the Krita age Manu was lord of the earth, wielding the scepter. His son was known under the name of Prasandi. Prasandi had a son named Kshupa. Kshupa's son was that lord of men, King Ikshwaku. He, O king, had 100 sons endowed with preeminent piety. And all of them were made monarchs by King Ikshwaku. The eldest of them, Vyasa by name, became the model of bowmen. Vyansa's son, O Bharata, was the auspicious Vivinsa. Vivinsa, O king, had 5 and 10 sons. All of them were powerful archers, reverential to the Brahmanas and truthful, gentle, and ever-speaking fair. The eldest brother, Kaninatra, oppressed all his brothers. And having conquered the entire kingdom rid of all troubles, Kaninatra could not retain his supremacy, nor were the people pleased with him. And dethroning him, they, O foremost of monarchs, invested his son Suvaracha with the rights of sovereignty, and, having effected this, experienced joy in their hearts. Seeing the reverses sustained by his sight as well as his expulsion from the empire, he was ever intent on bringing about the welfare of the people, being devoted to the Brahmanas, speaking the truth, practicing purity, and restraining his senses and thoughts. And the subjects were well pleased with that high-minded one constant in virtue. But he being constantly engaged in virtuous deeds, his treasures and vehicles became greatly reduced. And on his treasury having become depleted, the feudatory princes swarming round him began to give him trouble. Being thus oppressed by many foes while his treasury, horses, and vehicles were impoverished, the king underwent great tribulation along with his retainers and the denizens of his capital. Although his power waned greatly, yet the foes could not slay the king, for his power, O Yudhishthira, was established in righteousness. And when he had reached the extreme of misery along with the citizens, he blew his hand with his mouth, and from that there appeared a supply of forces. And then he vanquished all the kings living along the borders of his dominions. And from this circumstance, O king, he hath been celebrated as Karandama. His son, the first, Karandama, who was born at the beginning of the Treta age, equaled Indra himself and was endowed with grace, and invincible even by the immortals. At that time all the kings were under his control, and alike by virtue of his wealth and for his prowess, he became their emperor. In short, the righteous king Avikshit by name became like unto Indra himself in heroism, and he was given to sacrifices, delight took in virtue, and held his senses under restraint. And in energy he resembled the sun, and in forbearance earth herself. In intelligence he was like Vrahaspati, and in calmness the mountain Himavat himself. And that king delighted the hearts of his subjects by act, thought, speech, self-restraint, and forbearance. He performed hundreds of horse sacrifices, and the potent and learned Anjara himself served him as priest. His son surpassed his sire in the possession of good qualities. Named Maruta, that lord of kings was righteous and great renown, and possessed the might of 10,000 elephants. He was like unto Vishnu's second self. Desirous of celebrating a sacrifice, that virtuous monarch, coming to Mount Meru on the northern side of Himavat, caused thousands of shining golden vessels to be forged. There on a huge golden hill he performed the rites. And goldsmiths made basins and vessels and pans and seats without number. And the sacrificial ground was near this place. And that righteous lord of earth, King Maruta, along with other princes, performed a sacrifice there. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 5. Yudhishthira said, O best of speakers, how that king became so powerful. And how, O twice-born one, did he obtain so much gold? And where now, O reverend sire, is all his wealth? And, O ascetic, how can we secure the same? Vyasa thereupon said, as the numerous offspring of the Prajapati Deksha, the Asuras and the Celestials challenged each other to encounter, so in the same way Anjara's sons, the exceedingly energetic Vrihaspati and the ascetic Samvarta, of equal vows, challenged each other, O king. Vrihaspati began to worry Samvarta again and again. And constantly troubled by his elder brother, he, O Bharata, renouncing his riches, went to the woods, with nothing to cover his body save the open sky. At that time, Vasva, having vanquished and destroyed the Asuras, and obtained the sovereignty of the celestial regions, had appointed as his priest Anjara's eldest son, that best of Brahmanas, Vrihaspati. Formerly Anjara was the family priest of King Karandama. Matchless among men in might, prowess and character, powerful like unto Sadakratu, righteous-souled and of rigid vows, O king, he had vehicles, and warrior, and many adherents, and superb and costly bedsteads, produced through dint of meditation by the breath of his mouth. And by his native virtues, the monarch had brought all the princes under his sway. And having lived as long as he desired, he ascended to the heaven in his corporal embodiment. And his son named Avikshit, conqueror of foes, righteous like unto Yayati, brought all the earth under his dominion. And both in merit and might the king resembled his sire. He had a son named Maruta, endowed with energy, and resembling Vasva himself. This earth clad in oceans, felt herself drawn towards him. He always used to defy the Lord of the Celestials, and O son of Pandu, Vasva also defied Maruta. And Maruta, master of earth, was pure and possessed of perfections. And in spite of his striving, Sakra could not prevail over him. And incapable of controlling him, he riding on the horse, along with the celestials summoning Vrihaspati, spoke to him thus, O Vrihaspati, if thou wishest to do what is agreeable to me, do not perform priestly offices for Maruta on behalf of the deities or the ancestral manes. I have, O Vrihaspati, obtained the sovereignty of the three worlds, while Maruta is merely the lord of the earth. How, O Brahmana, having acted as priest unto the immortal king of the celestials, wilt thou unhesitatingly perform priestly function unto Maruta subject to death? Good betide thee! Either espouse my side or that of the monarch, Maruta, or forsaking Maruta, gladly come over to me. Thus accosted by the sovereign of the celestials, Vrihaspati, reflecting for a moment, replied unto the king of the immortals, Thou art the lord of creatures, and in thee are the worlds established, and thou hast destroyed Namuchi, Visvarupa, and Vala. Thou, O hero, alone encompassest the highest prosperity of the celestials, and, O slayer of Vala, thou sustainest the earth as well as the heaven. How, O foremost of the celestials, having officiated as thy priest, shall I, O chastiser of Paka, serve a mortal prince? Do thou listen to what I say. Even if the god of fire cease to cause heat and warmth, or the earth change its nature, or the sun ceases to give light, I shall never deviate from the truth that I have spoken. Vyasa continued. On hearing this speech from Vrihaspati, Indra became cured of his envious feelings, and then praising him he repaired to his own mansion. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 6. Vyasa said, the ancient legend of Vrihaspati and the wise Maruta is cited in this connection. On hearing of the compact made by Anjira's son Vrihaspati with the lord of the gods, Indra, King Maruta made the necessary preparations for a great sacrifice. The eloquent grandson of Karandama, Maruta, having conceived the idea of a sacrifice in his mind, went to Vrihaspati and addressed him thus, O worshipful ascetic, I have intended to perform the sacrifice which thou didst propose to me once on a previous occasion and in accordance with thy instructions, and I now desire to appoint thee as officiating priest in this sacrifice, the materials whereof have also been collected by me. O excellent one, thou art our family priest, therefore do thou take those sacrificial things and perform the sacrifice thyself. Vrihaspati said, O Lord of the earth, I do not desire to perform thy sacrifice. I have been appointed as priest by the Lord of the gods, Indra, and I have promised to him to act as such. Maruta said, Thou art our hereditary family priest, and for this reason I entertain great regard for thee, and I have acquired the right of being assisted at sacrifices by thee, and therefore it is meet that thou shouldst officiate as priest at my sacrifice. Vrihaspati said, having, O Maruta, acted as priest to the immortals, how can I act as such to mortal men, and whether thou dost depart hence or stay, I tell thee, I have ceased to act as priest to any but the immortals. O thou of mighty arms, I am unable to act as thy priest now. And according to thy own desire, thou canst appoint any one as thy priest who will perform thy sacrifice. Vyasa said, thus told, King Maruta became confused with shame, and while returning home with his mind oppressed by anxiety, he met Narada on his way. And that monarch, on seeing the divine Rishi Narada, stood before him with due salutation, with his hands clasped together. Then Narada, addressing him thus, said, O royal sage, thou seemest to be not well pleased in thy mind. Is all well with thee? Where hast thou been, O sinless one, and whence the cause of this thy mental disquietude? And, O king, if there be no objection to thy telling it to me, do thou, O best of kings, disclose the cause of thy anxiety to me, so that, O prince, I may allay the disquietude of thy mind with all my efforts. Vyasa continued, thus addressed by the great Rishi Narada, King Maruta informed him of the rebuff he had received from his religious preceptor. Maruta said, seeking for a priest to officiate at my sacrifice, I went to that priest of the immortals, Vrihaspati, the son of Anjira, but he did not choose to accept my offer. Having met with this rebuff from him, I have no desire to live any longer now, for by his abandoning me thus, I have, O Narada, become contaminated with sin. Vyasa said, thus told by that king, Narada, O mighty prince, made this reply to him with words which seemed to revive that son of Avikshit. Narada said, the virtuous son of Anjira, Samvarta by name, is wandering over all the quarters of the earth in a naked state to the wonder of all creatures. Do thou, O prince, go to him. If Vrihaspati does not desire to officiate at thy sacrifice, the powerful Samvarta, if pleased with thee, will perform thy sacrifice. Maruta said, I feel as if instilled with new life by these thy words, O Narada, but O the best of speakers, do thou tell me where I can find Samvarta, and how I can remain by his side, and how I am to act so that he may not abandon me, for I do not desire to live if I meet with a rebuff from him also. Narada said, desirous of seeing Mahesvara, O prince, he wanders about at his pleasure in the city of Varanasi, in the garb of a madman. And having reached the gate of that city, thou must place a dead body somewhere near it, and the man who shall turn away on seeing the corpse, do thou, O prince, know that man to be Samvarta, and knowing him, do thou follow his footsteps wheresoever that powerful man chooses to go, and finding him, at length, in a lonely place thou must seek his protection with thy hands clasped together in supplication to him. And if he inquires of thee as to the person who has given thee the information about his own self, do thou tell him that Narada has informed thee about Samvarta. And if he should ask thee to follow me, thou must tell him without any hesitation that I have entered into the fire. Vyasa said, having signified his assent to the proposal of Narada, that royal sage, after duly worshipping him, and taking his permission, repaired to the city of Varanasi, and having reached there, that famous prince did as he had been told, and remembering the words of Narada, he placed a corpse at the gate of the city. And by coincidence, that Brahmana also entered the gate of the city at the same time. Then on beholding the corpse, he suddenly turned away. And on seeing him turn back, that prince, the son of Avikshit, followed his footsteps with his hands clasped together, and with the object of receiving instruction from him. And then finding him in a lonely place, Samvarta covered the king with mud and ashes and phlegm and spittle. And though thus worried and oppressed by Samvarta, the king followed that sage with his hands clasped together in supplication and trying to appease him. At length overcome with fatigue, and reaching the cool shade of a sacred fig tree with many branches, Samvarta desisted from his course and sat himself to rest. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 7. Samvarta said, How hast thou come to know me, and who has referred thee to me? Do thou tell this to me truly, if thou wishest me to do what is good to thee. And if thou speak truly, thou shalt attain all the objects of thy desire, and shouldst thou tell a lie, thy head shall be riven in 100 pieces. Maruta said, I have been told by Narada, wandering on his way, that thou art the son of our family priest, and this information has inclined my mind towards thee with exquisite satisfaction. Samvarta said, Thou hast told this to me truly. He, Narada, knows me to be a performer of sacrifices. Now tell me, where is Narada living at present? Maruta said, That prince of celestial saints, Narada, having given me this information about thee, and commended me to thy care, has entered into the fire. Vyasa said, hearing these words from the king, Maruta, Samvarta was highly gratified, and he said, addressing Maruta, I too am quite able to do all that. Then, O prince, that Brahmana, raving like a lunatic, and repeatedly scolding Maruta with rude words, again accosted him thus, I am afflicted with a cerebral disorder, and I always act according to the random caprices of my own mind. Why art thou bent upon having this sacrifice performed by a priest of such a singular disposition? My brother is able to officiate at sacrifices, and he has gone over to Vyasa, Indra, and is engaged in performing his sacrifices. Do thou therefore have thy sacrifice performed by him. My elder brother has forcibly taken away from me all my household goods and mystical gods and sacrificing clients, and has now left to me only this physical body of mine, and, O son of Avikshit, as he is worthy of all respect from me, I cannot by any means officiate at thy sacrifice, unless with his permission. Thou must therefore go to Vrihaspati first, and taking his permission thou canst come back to me, if thou hast any desire to perform a sacrifice, and then only shall I officiate at thy sacrifice. Maruta said, Do thou listen to me, O Samvarta, I did go to Vrihaspati first, but desiring the patronage of Vyasa, he did not wish to have me as his sacrificer. He said, having secured the priesthood of the immortals, I do not desire to act for mortals, and I have been forbidden by Sakra, Indra, to officiate at Maruda's sacrifice, as he told me that Maruda, having become lord of the earth, was always filled with a desire to rival him. And to this thy brother assented by saying to the slayer of Vala, Indra, be it so. Know thou, O best of ascetics, that as he had succeeded in securing the protection of the Lord of the Celestials, I repaired to him with gratified heart, but he did not agree to act as my priest. And thus repulsed, I now desire to spend all I possess, to have this sacrifice performed by thee, and to outstrip Vasva by the merit of thy good offices. As I have been repulsed by Vrihaspati for no fault of mine, I have now no desire, O Brahmana, to go to him to seek his aid in this sacrifice. Samvarta said, I can certainly, O king, accomplish all that thou desirest, if only thou agree to do all that I shall ask thee to do, but I apprehend that Vrihaspati and Purandara, Indra, when they will learn that I am engaged in performing thy sacrifice, will be filled with wrath, and do all they can to injure thee. Therefore, do thou assure me of thy steadfastness, so as to ensure my coolness and constancy, as otherwise. If I am filled with wrath against thee, I shall destroy thee and thy kindred to ashes. Maruda said, If ever I forsake thee, may I never attain the blessed regions as long as the mountains shall exist, and the 1,000-rayed sun continue to emit heat. If I forsake dice, may I never attain true wisdom, and remain forever addicted to worldly, material pursuits. Samvarta said, Listen, O son of Avikshit, excellent as it is the bent of thy mind to perform this act, so too, O king, have I in my mind the ability to perform the sacrifice. I tell thee, O king, that thy good things will become imperishable, and that thou shalt lord it over Sakra and the celestials with Gandharvas. For myself, I have no desire to amass wealth or sacrificial presents. I shall only do what is disagreeable to both Indra and my brother. I shall certainly make thee attain equality with Sakra, and I tell thee truly that I shall do what is agreeable to thee. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 8. Samvarta said, There is a peak named Munjaban on the summits of the Himalaya mountains, where the adorable Lord of Umma, Mahadeva, is constantly engaged in austere devotional exercises. There the mighty and worshipful god of great puissance, accompanied by his consort Umma, and armed with his trident, surrounded by wild goblins of many sorts, pursuing his random wish or fancy, constantly resides in the shade of giant forest trees, or in the caves, or on the rugged peaks of the great mountain. And there the Rudras, the Satyas, Viswadevas, the Vasus, Yama, Varuna, and Kuvara with all his attendants, and the spirits and goblins, and the 2 Ashwins, the Gandharvas, the Apsaras, the Yakshas, as also the celestial sages, the sun gods, as well as the gods presiding over the winds, and evil spirits of all sorts, worship the high-souled Lord of Umma, possessed of diverse characteristics. And there, O king, the adorable god sports with the wild and playful followers of Kuvara, possessed of weird and ghostly appearances. Glowing with its own splendor, that mountain looks resplendent as the morning sun. And no creature with his natural eyes made of flesh can ever ascertain its shape or configuration, and neither heat nor cold prevails there, nor doth the sun shine, nor do the winds blow. And, O king, neither doth senility nor hunger, nor thirst, nor death, nor fear afflict any one at that place. And, O foremost of conquerors, on all sides of that mountain there exist mines of gold, resplendent as the rays of the sun. And, O king, the attendants of Kuvara, desirous of doing good to him, protect these mines of gold from intruders, with uplifted arms. Hie thee thither, and appease that adorable god who is known by the names of Sarva, Beta, Rudra, Siddhikanta, Surapa, Suvracha, Kaparti, Kerala, Haryaksha, Varata, Triaksha, Pushnodantavida, Vamana, Shiva, Yamya, Avyaktarupa, Sadvrita, Sankara, Kshimya, Harakisa, Stanu, Purusha, Haranitra, Munda, Krishna, Uttarana, Bhaskara, Sutirtha, Devadeva, Rana, Ushnashi, Suvaktra, Sahasraksha, Midvan, Jarisa, Prasanta, Yada, Kauravas, Vilwadanda, Siddha, Sarvadandidhara, Mriga, Vyada, Mahan, Denisa, Bhava, Vara, Somavaktra, Siddhamantra, Chakshu, Hiranyavahu, Ugra, Dikpati, Lalahana, Gashta, Shidhamantra, Vrishnu, Pasupati, Buddhapati, Vrisha, Matrabhakta, Sanani, Madhyama, Sruvahasta, Yadi, Danwi, Bhargava, Aya, Krishnanatra, Virupaksh, Tikshnadanshtra, Tikshna, Vaiswanaramukha, Mahaduti, Ananga, Sarva, Dikpati, Bilohita, Dipta, Diptaksha, Mahaja, Vajaritas, Suvapu, Prithu, Kritavasa, Kapalmali, Suvarnamukita, Mahadeva, Krishna, Triamvaka, Anaga, Krodana, Nizansa, Mridu, Valsali, Dandi, Taptatapa, Akurakarma, Sahasrasura, Sahasracharana, Svadasvarupa, Vavirupa, Danstri, Pinaki, Mahadeva, Mahayogi, Avyay, Trisilahasta, Varada, Triamvaka, Bhuvaneswara, Tripurana, Trinayana, Trilokiza, Mahanja, Sarvabhuta Sarvabhuta Dharanidhara, Isana, Sankara, Sarva, Shiva, Visveswara, Bhava, Umapti, Pasupati, Visvarupa, Mahesvara, Virupaksh, Dasabuja, Vrishavadwaja, Ugra, Stanu, Shiva, Rudra, Sarva, Jarisa, Iswara, Siddhakantha, Aya, Sukra, Prithu, Prithahara, Vara, Visvarupa, Virupaksh, Vahirupa, Umapti, Anangangahara, Hara, Saranya, Mahadeva, Chaturmukha. Their bowing unto that deity, must thou crave his protection. And thus, O Prince, making thy submission to that high-souled Mahadeva of great energy, shalt thou acquire that gold. And the men who go there thus, succeed in obtaining the gold. Thus instructed, Maruta, the son of Karandama, did as he was advised, and made superhuman arrangements for the performance of his sacrifice. And artisans manufactured vessels of gold for that sacrifice. And Vrihaspati too, hearing of the prosperity of Maruta, eclipsing that of the gods, became greatly grieved at heart, and distressed at the thought that his rival Samvarta should become prosperous, became sick at heart, and the glow of his complexion left him, and his frame became emaciated. And when the Lord of the gods came to know that Vrihaspati was much aggrieved, he went to him attended by the immortals, and addressed him thus. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 9. Indra said, Dost thou, O Vrihaspati, sleep in peace, and are thy servants agreeable to thee? Dost thou seek the welfare of the gods, and do the gods, O Brahmana, protect thee? Vrihaspati said, I do sleep in peace in my bed, O Lord of the gods, and my servants are to my liking, and I always seek the welfare of the gods, and they cherish me well. Indra said, Whence then is this pain, mental or physical, and why art thou pale and altered in appearance, complexion, at present? Tell me, O Brahmana, who those people are, who have caused thee pain, so that I may kill them all. Vrihaspati said, O Indra, I have heard that Maruta will perform a great sacrifice at which exquisite presents will be given by him to Brahmanas, and that at his sacrifice Samvarta will act as the officiating priest, and therefore do I desire that he may not officiate as priest at that sacrifice. Indra said, Thou, O Brahmana, hast attained all the object of thy desire when thou hast become the excellent priest of the gods, versed in all the sacred hymns, and hast overreached the influence of death and dotage. What can Samvarta do to thee now? Vrihaspati said, Prosperity of a rival is always painful to one's feelings, and for this reason too, thou dost with tri-attendant gods persecute the Asuras with their with and kin, and kill the most prosperous among them. Hence, O Lord of the gods, am I changed in appearance at the thought that my rival is prospering. Therefore, O Indra, do thou, by all means, restrain Samvarta and King Maruta. Indra turning to Agni said, Do thou, O Jataveda, following my direction, go to King Maruta to present Vrihaspati to him, and say unto him that this Vrihaspati will officiate at his sacrifice and make him immortal. Agni said, I shall presently, O adorable one, repair thither as thy messenger, to present Vrihaspati to King Maruta, and to make Indra's words true, and to show respect to Vrihaspati. Agni departed. Vyasa said, Then the high-souled fire god went on his errand, devastating all the forests and trees, like unto the mighty wind, roaring and revolving at random at the end of the winter season. Maruta said, Behold, I find the fire god come in his own embodiment this day. Therefore do thou, O Muni, offer him a seat and water, and a cow, and water for washing the feet. Agni said, I accept thy offerings of water, seat, and water for washing the feet. O sinless one, do thou know me as the messenger of Indra, come to thee, in accordance with his directions. Maruta said, O fire god, is the glorious lord of the celestials happy, and is he pleased with us, and are the other gods loyal to him? Do thou enlighten me duly on all these points. Agni said, O Lord of the earth, Sakra is perfectly happy, he is pleased with thee, and wishes to make thee free from senility, and all the other gods are loyal to him. Do thou, O king, listen to the message of the Lord of the celestials. And the object for which he has sent me to thee is to present Vrihaspati to Maruta. O prince, let this priest of the celestials perform thy sacrifice, and make thee, who art only a mortal, attain immortality. Maruta said, This twice-born Brahmana Samvarta will perform my sacrifice, and I pray to Vrihaspati that he having acted as priest to Mahendra, Indra, it does not look well for him now to act as priest to mortal men. Agni said, If this Vrihaspati officiate as thy priest, then shalt thou by the blessings of Devaraja, Indra, attain the highest region in the celestial mansion, and attaining fame shalt thou certainly conquer the heavenly region. And, O Lord of men, if Vrihaspati act as thy priest, thou shalt be able to conquer all the regions inhabited by men, and the heavenly regions, and all the highest regions created by Prajapati, and even the entire kingdom of the gods. Samvarta said, Thou must never come again thus to present Vrihaspati to Maruta, for know, O Pavaka, Agni, if thou dost, I losing my temper, will burn thee with my fierce evil eyes. Vyasa said, Then Agni apprehending destruction by fire, and trembling like the leaves of the Aswatha tree, Ficus religiosa, returned to the gods, and the high-souled Sakra seeing that carrier of oblations, Agni, in the company of Vrihaspati said as follows. Indra said, O Jataveda, Agni, didst thou go to present Vrihaspati to Maruta according to my direction? What did that sacrificing king say unto thee, and did he accept my message? Agni said, Thy message was not acceptable by Maruta, and when urged by me, he clasping the hands of Vrihaspati, repeatedly said, that Samvarta would act as his priest. And he also observed that he did not desire to attain the worldly and the heavenly regions and all the highest regions of Prajapati, and that if he were so minded, he would accept the terms of Indra. Indra said, Do thou go back to that king and meeting him, tell him these words of mine, full of significance, and if he obey them not, I shall strike him with my thunderbolt. Agni said, Let this king of the Gandharvas repair thither as thy messenger, O Vasva, for I am afraid to go thither myself. Know, O Sakra, that highly incensed Samvarta, used to ascetic practices, told me these words in a rage. I shall burn thee with my fierce evil eyes if thou on any account come again here to present Vrihaspati to King Maruta. Sakra said, O Jataveda, It is thou who dost burn all other things, and there is none else who can reduce thee to ashes. All the world is afraid to come in contact with thee. O carrier of oblations, these words of thine are worthy of no credence. Agni said, Thou, O Sakra, hast encompassed the dominion of the heaven and the earth and the firmament by the might of thy own arms, but even thus how could Vritra, of old, wrest from thee the sovereignty of the celestial regions? Indra said, I can reduce my foes to submission, and can even reduce the size of a mountain to an atom, if I will it. But, O Vani, as I do not accept the libation of Soma if offered by a foe, and as I do not strike the weak with my thunderbolt, Vritra seemed to triumph over me for a time. But who among mortals can live in peace by creating feud with me? I have banished the Kalakiyas to the earth, and removed the Danavas from heaven, and have terminated the existence of Prahlada in heaven. Can there be any man who can live in peace by provoking my enmity? Agni said, Dost thou, O Mahendra, remember that in olden times when the sage Chayavana officiated at the sacrifice of Saryati with the twin gods Ashwins and himself appropriated the Soma offering alone, thou wert filled with wrath, and when bent upon preventing Saryati's sacrifice, thou didst violently strike Chayavana with thy thunderbolt. But that Brahmana, O Purandara, giving way to passion, was able by the power of his devotions to seize and hold fast by hand with thy thunderbolt in it. And in a rage, he again created a terrible-looking enemy of thine, the Asura named Mata, assuming all shapes, on beholding whom thou didst shut thine eyes with fear, whose one huge jaw was placed on earth, and the other extended to the celestial regions, and who looked terrible with his 1,000 sharp teeth extending over 100 yojanas, and had 4 prominent ones thick set, and shining like a pillar of silver, and extending over 200 yojanas. And when grinding his teeth he pursued thee with his terrible and uplifted pike with the object of killing thee. Thou on beholding that terrible monster, presented a pitiful spectacle to all the bystanders. Then, O slayer of Danavas, overcome with fear of the monster, with thy hands clasped in supplication, thou didst seek the protection of the great sage. The might of Brahmanas, O Sakra, is greater than that of the Kshatriyas. None are more powerful than Brahmanas, and knowing duly, as I do, the power of Brahmanas, I do not, O Sakra, desire to come in conflict with Samvarta. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 10. Indra said, Even so it is, the might of Brahmanas is great, and there are none more powerful than Brahmanas, but I can never bear with equanimity the insolent pride of Avikshita's son, and so shall I smite him with my thunderbolt. Therefore, O Dhritarashtra, do thou according to my direction repair to King Maruta attended by Samvarta, and deliver this message to him. Do thou, O Prince, accept Vrahaspati as thy spiritual preceptor, as otherwise I shall strike thee with my terrific thunderbolt. Vyasa said, Then Dhritarashtra betook himself to that monarch's court and delivered this message to him from Vasva. Dhritarashtra said, O Lord of men, know that I am Dhritarashtra the Gandharv, come here with the object of delivering to thee the message of Indra. Do thou, O lion among kings, listen to the words which the high-souled Lord of all the worlds meant for thee, that one of incomprehensible achievements, Indra, only said this much, Do thou accept Vrahaspati as thy officiating priest for the sacrifice, or if thou do not comply with my request, I shall strike thee with my terrific thunderbolt. Maruta said, Thou, O Purandara, the Viswadevas, the Vasus and the Ashwins, ye all know, that in this world there is no escape from the consequences of playing false to a friend. It is a great sin like unto that of murdering a Brahmin. Let Vrahaspati, therefore, officiate as priest to that Mahendra the supreme Deva, God, the highest one wielding the thunderbolt, and O Prince, Samvarta will act as my priest, as neither his, Indra's, words, nor thine commend themselves to me. The Gandharv said, "Do thou, O lion among princes, listen to the terrible war cry of Vyasa roaring in the heavens. Assuredly and openly will Mahendra hurl his thunderbolt at thee. Do thou therefore bethink thyself of thy good, for this is the time to do it." Vyasa said, thus accosted by Dhritarashtra, and hearing the roar of howling Vyasa, the king communicated this intelligence to Samvarta, steadfast in devotion and the highest of all virtuous men. Maruta said, "Verily this rain cloud floating in the air indicates that Indra must be near at present. Therefore, O Prince of Brahmanas, I seek shelter from thee. Do thou, O best of Brahmanas, remove this fear of Indra from my mind. The wielder of the thunderbolt is coming, encompassing the 10 directions of space with his terrible and superhuman refulgence, and my assistants at this sacrificial assembly have been overcome with fright." Samvarta said, "O lion among kings, thy fear of Sakra will soon be dispelled, and I shall soon remove this terrible pain by means of my magic lore, incantation. Be calm and have no fear of being overpowered by India. Thou hast nothing to fear from the god of 100 sacrifices. I shall use my staying charms, O king, and the weapons of all the gods will avail them not. Let the lightning flash in all the directions of space, and the winds entering into the clouds pour down the showers amid the forests, and the waters deluge the heavens, and the flashes of lightning that are seen will avail not. Thou hast nothing to fear. Let Vyasa pour down the rains and blast his terrific thunderbolt where he will, floating among the watery masses, clouds, for thy destruction, for the god Vani, Agni, will protect thee in every way, and make thee attain all the objects of thy desire." Maruta said, "This appalling crash of the thunderbolt together with the howling of the winds seem terrible to my ears, and my heart is afflicted again and again, O Brahmana, and my peace of mind is gone at present." Samvarta said, "O king, the feat in thy mind from this terrible thunderbolt will leave thee presently. I shall dispel the thunder by the aid of the winds, and setting aside all fear from thy mind, do thou accept a boon from me according to thy heart's desire, and I shall accomplish it for thee." Maruta said, "I desire, O Brahmana, that Indra all on a sudden should come in person at this sacrifice, and accept the oblation offered to him, and that all the other gods also come and take their own shares of the offerings, and accept the libations of Soma offered to them." Samvarta said, "I have by the power of my incantations attracted Indra in person to this sacrifice. Behold, O monarch, Indra coming with his horses, and worshipped by the other gods hastening to this sacrifice." Then the lord of the Devas, attended by the other gods, and riding in his chariot drawn by the most excellent steeds, approached the sacrificial altar of that son of Avikshit and drank the Soma libations of that unrivaled monarch. And King Maruta with his priest rose to receive Indra coming with the host of gods, and well pleased in mind, he welcomed the lord of the Devas with due and foremost honors according to the Sastras. Samvarta said, "Welcome to thee, O Indra, by thy presence here, O learned one, this sacrifice has been made grand. O slayer Orvala and Vritra, do thou again quaff this Soma juice produced by me today." Maruta said, "Do thou look with kindness upon me. I bow unto thee, O Indra, by thy presence, my sacrifice has been perfected, and my life too blessed with good results. O Surendra, this excellent Brahmana, the younger brother of Vrihaspati, is engaged in performing my sacrifices." Indra said, "I know thy priest, this highly energetic ascetic, the younger brother of Vrihaspati, at whose invitation I have come to this sacrifice. I am, O monarch, well pleased with thee, and my resentment against thee hath been destroyed." Samvarta said, "If, O Prince of the Devas, thou art pleased with us, do thou thyself give all the directions for this sacrifice, and O Surendra, thyself ordain the sacrificial portions for the gods, so that, O God, all the world may know that it hath been done by thee." Vyasa said, thus accosted by the son of Angira, Sakra himself gave directions to all the gods to erect the hall of assembly, and 1,000 well-furnished excellent rooms looking grand as in a picture, and speedily to complete the staircase massive and durable, for the ascent of the Gandharvas and Apsaras, and to furnish that portion of the sacrificial ground reserved for the dance of the Apsaras, like unto the palace of Indra in the heaven. O king, thus directed, the renowned dwellers of heaven speedily fulfilled the directions of Sakra. And then, O king, Indra, well pleased and adored, thus said to King Maruta, O prince, by associating with thee at this sacrifice, thine ancestors who have gone before thee, as well as the other gods, have been highly gratified and have accepted the oblations offered by thee. And now, O king, let the foremost of regenerate beings offer on the sacrificial altar a red bull appertaining to the fire god, and a sacred and duly consecrated blue bull with a variegated skin appertaining to the Viswadevas. Then, O king, the sacrificial ceremony grew in splendor, wherein the gods themselves collected the food, and Sakra, the lord of the gods, possessed of horses, and worshipped by the Brahmanas, became an assistant at the sacrifice. And then the high-souled Samvarta, ascending the altar, and looking radiant as the second embodiment of the blazing fire, loudly addressing the gods with complaisance, offered oblations of clarified butter to the fire with incantation of the sacred hymns. And then the slayer of Vala first drank the soma juice, and then the assembly of other gods drank soma. And then in happiness and with the king's permission they returned home and well pleased and delighted. Then that monarch, the slayer of his enemies, with a delighted heart, placed heaps of gold on diverse spots, and distributing the immense wealth to the Brahmanas, he looked glorious like Kuvara, the god of wealth. And with a buoyant heart, the king filled his treasury with different kinds of wealth, and with the permission of his spiritual preceptor, he returned to his kingdom, and continued to rule the entire realm extending to the borders of the sea. So virtuous in this world was that king, at whose sacrifice such an enormous quantity of gold was collected, and now, O prince, thou must collect that gold, and worshipping the gods with due rites, do thou perform this sacrifice. Vaisampayana continued, then the Pandava prince Yudhishthira was delighted on hearing this speech of the son of Satyavati, Vyasa, and desirous of performing his sacrifice with those riches, he held repeated consultations with his ministers. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 11. Vaisampayana said, when Vyasa of wonderful achievements had concluded his speech to the king, the highly puissant son of Vasudeva, Krishna, also addressed him. Knowing the king, the son of Pritha, afflicted in mind, and bereft of his relatives and kinsmen slain in battle, and appearing crestfallen like the sun-darkened eclipse, or fire smothered by smoke, that prop of the Vrishni race, Krishna, comforting the son of Dharma, essayed to address him thus. Vasudeva said, all crookedness of heart leads to destruction, perdition, and all rectitude leads to Brahman, spiritual excellence. If this and this only is the aim and object of all true wisdom, then what can mental distraction do to one who understands this? Thy karma has not yet been annihilated, nor have thy enemies been subjugated, for thou dost not yet know the enemies that are still lurking within thine own flesh. I shall, therefore, relate to thee truly as I have heard it, the story of the war of Indra with Vritra as it took place. In ancient times the Prithvi, earth, O king, was encompassed by Vritra, and by this abstraction of earthly matter, the seat of all odor, there arose bad odors on all sides, and the performer of 100 sacrifices, Indra, being much enraged by this act, hurled his thunderbolt at Vritra. And being deeply wounded by the thunderbolt of mighty Indra, Vritra entered into the waters, and by doing so he destroyed their property. The waters being seized by Vritra, their liquid property left them. At this Indra became highly enraged and again smote him with his thunderbolt. And he, Vritra, smitten by the thunderbolt by the most powerful Indra, betook himself to the Jyoti, luminous matter, and abstracted its inherent property. The luminous matter being overwhelmed by Vritra and its property, color and form being thereby lost, the wrathful Indra again hurled his thunderbolt at him. And thus wounded again by Indra of immeasurable power, Vritra entered all on a sudden into the Vayu, gaseous matter, and thereafter made away with its inherent property. And this matter being overpowered by Vritra and its property, viz., touch being lost, Indra became again filled with wrath and flung his thunderbolt at him. And wounded therein by the mighty Indra, he overwhelmed the Akasa, ether, and took away its inherent property, and the Akasa being overwhelmed by Vritra and its property, sound being destroyed, the god of 100 sacrifices highly incensed, again smote him with his thunderbolt. And thus smitten by the mighty Indra, he suddenly entered into his Sakra's body, and took away its essential attributes. And overtaken by Vritra, he was filled with great illusion. And, O venerable sir, the mightiest of Bharata's race, we have heard that Vasistha comforted Indra when he was thus afflicted, and that the god of 100 sacrifices slew Vritra in his body by means of his invisible thunderbolt. And know, O prince, that this religious mystery was recited by Sakra to the great sages, and they in turn told it to me. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 12. Vasudeva said, there are two kinds of ailments, physical and mental. They are produced by the mutual action of the body and mind on each other, and they never arise without the interaction of the two. The ailment that is produced in the body is called the physical ailment, and that which has its seat in the mind is known as the mental ailment. The cold, the warm, phlegm and bile, as well as the windy humors, O king, are the essential transformations generated in the physical body, and when these humors are evenly distributed and are present in due proportions, they are said to be symptomatic of good health. The warm humor is acted upon, allayed, by the cold, and the cold by the warm. And sattva, rajas, and tamas are the attributes of the soul, and it is said by the learned that their presence in due proportions indicates health of the mind. But if any of the three preponderates, some remedy is enjoined to restore the equilibrium. Happiness is overcome by sorrow, and sorrow by pleasure. Some people, while afflicted by sorrow, desire to recall past happiness, while others, while in the enjoyment of happiness, desire to recall past sorrow. But thou, O son of Kunti, dost neither desire to recall thy sorrows nor thy happiness. What else dost thou desire to recall barring this delusion of sorrow? Or, perchance, O son of Pritha, it is thy innate nature, by which thou art at present overpowered. Thou dost not desire to recall to thy mind the painful sight of Krishna standing in the hall of assembly with only one piece of cloth to cover her body, and while she was in her menses and in the presence of all the Pandavas. And it is not meet that thou shouldst brood over thy departure from the city, and thy exile with the hide of the antelope for thy robe, and thy wanderings in the great forest, nor shouldst thou recall to thy mind the affliction from Janasura, the fight with Chitrasena, and thy troubles from the Saint-Havas. Nor it is proper, O son of Pritha, and conqueror of thy foes, that thou shouldst recall the incident of Kachaka's kicking Draupadi during the period of thy exile passed in absolute concealment, nor the incidents of the fight which took place between thyself and Drona and Bhishma. The time has now arrived when thou must fight the battle which each must fight single-handed with his mind. Therefore, O chief of Bharata's race, thou must now prepare to carry the struggle against thy mind, and by dint of abstraction and the merit of thine own karma, thou must reach the other side of, overcome, the mysterious and unintelligible mind. In this war there will be no need for any missiles, nor for friends, nor attendants. The battle which is to be fought alone and single-handed has now arrived for thee. And if vanquished in this struggle, thou shalt find thyself in the most wretched plight. And, O son of Kunti, knowing this, and acting accordingly, shalt thou attain success. And knowing this wisdom and the destiny of all creatures, and following the conduct of thy ancestors, do thou duly administer thy kingdom. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 13. Vasudeva said, O scion of Bharata's race, salvation is not attained by foregoing the external things, like kingdom, etc. It is only attained by giving up things which pander to the flesh, body. The virtue and happiness which are attainable by the person who has renounced only the external objects, but who is at the same time engrossed by passions and weakness of the flesh, let these be the portion of our enemies. The word with 2 letters is mrityu, death of the soul or perdition, and the word with 3 letters is saswata, Brahman, or the eternal spirit. The consciousness that this or that thing is mine, or the state of being addicted to worldly objects is mrityu, and the absence of that feeling is saswatam. And these 2, Brahman and mrityu, O king, have their seats in the souls of all creatures, and remaining unseen, they, without doubt, wage war with each other. And if, O Bharata, it be true that no creature is ever destroyed, then one doth not make oneself guilty of the death of a creature by piercing, destroying its body. What matters the world to a man, if having acquired the sovereignty of the whole earth with its mobile and immobile creation, he does not become attached to it, or engrossed in its enjoyment? But the man who, having renounced the world, has taken to the life of the recluse in the forest, living on wild roots and edibles, if such a man, O son of Pritha, has a craving for the good things of the world, and is addicted to them, he may be said to bear mrityu, death, in his mouth. Do thou, O Bharata, watch and observe the character of thy external and internal enemies, by means of thy spiritual vision, and the man who is able to perceive the nature of the eternal reality is able to overreach the influence of the great fear, perdition. Men do not look with approbation upon the conduct of those who are engrossed in worldly desires, and there is no act without having a desire at its root, and all desires are, as it were, the limbs, offshoots, of the mind. Therefore, wise men knowing this subjugate their desires. The yogi who holds communion with the Supreme Spirit knows yoga to be the perfect way to salvation by reason of the practices of his many former births. And remembering that what the soul desires is not conducive to piety and virtue, but that the suppression of the desires is at the root of all true virtue, such men do not engage in the practice of charity, Vedic learning, asceticism, and Vedic rites whose object is attainment of worldly prosperity, ceremonies, sacrifices, religious rules, and meditation, with the motive of securing any advantage thereby. By way of illustration of this truth, the sages versed in ancient lore recite these gathas called by the name of Kamajita. Do thou, O Yudhishthira, listen to the recital of them in detail. Kama says, no creature is able to destroy me without resorting to the proper methods, viz., subjugating of all desires and practice of yoga, etc. If a man knowing my power strive to destroy me by muttering prayers, etc., I prevail over him by deluding him with the belief that I am the subjective ego within him. If he wish to destroy me by means of sacrifices with many presents, I deceive him by appearing in his mind as a most virtuous creature amongst the mobile creation, and if he wish to annihilate me by mastering the Vedas and Vedangas, I overreach him by seeming to his mind to be the soul of virtue amongst the immobile creation. And if the man whose strength lies in truth desire to overcome me by patience, I appear to him as his mind, and thus he does not perceive my existence. And if the man of austere religious practices desire to destroy me by means of asceticism, I appear in the guise of asceticism in his mind, and thus he is prevented from knowing me. And the man of learning, who with the object of attaining salvation desires to destroy me, I frolic and laugh in the face of such a man intent on salvation. I am the everlasting one without a compeer, whom no creature can kill or destroy. For this reason thou too, O prince, divert thy desires, to virtue, so that, by this means, thou mayst attain what is well for thee. Do thou therefore make preparations for the due performance of the horse sacrifice with presents, and various other sacrifices of great splendor, and accompanied with presents. Let not therefore grief overpower thee again, on beholding thy friends lying slain on the battlefield. Thou canst not see the men slain in this battle alive again. Therefore shouldst thou perform magnificent sacrifices with presents, so that thou mayst attain fame in this world, and reach the perfect way hereafter. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 14. Vyasa said, with such speeches as these, was the royal saint Yudhishthira, bereft of his friends, consoled by those sages of great ascetic merits. And O monarch, that lord of men, exhorted by the worshipful Viswarashrava himself, and by Dwapayana, Vyasa, Krishna Devastana, Narada, Bhima, Nakula, Krishna, Draupadi, Sadeva, and the sharp-witted Vijaya, as well as by other great men, and Brahmanas versed in the sastras, became relieved of all mental affliction and sorrow arising from the death of his dear relations. And that monarch Yudhishthira, after performing the obsequial ceremonies of his departed friends, and honoring the Brahmanas and Devas, gods, brought the kingdom of the earth with its girdle of oceans under his sway. And that prince of Kuru's race, having regained his kingdom, with a tranquil mind, thus addressed Vyasa, Narada, and the other sages who were present. I have been comforted by the words of so great, ancient, and aged saints as yourselves, and I have now no cause left for the least affliction. And likewise, I have attained great wealth, with which I may worship the gods. Therefore, with your assistance, I shall now perform the sacrifice, O the best of regenerate beings. We have heard that those Himalayan regions are full of wonders. Therefore, O Brahmana, saint and grandsire, do thou so ordain that under thy protection we may safely reach the Himalaya mountains, the performance of my sacrifice being entirely within thy control. And then the adorable celestials Saint Narada and Devastana have also addressed exquisite and well-meaning words for our well-being. No unlucky man in times of great tribulation and distress has ever the good fortune to secure the services of such preceptors and friends approved by all virtuous men. Thus addressed by the king, those great saints, bidding the king and Krishna and Arjuna to repair to the Himalayan regions, then and there vanished in the presence of the assembled multitude, and the king, the lordly son of Dharma, then seated himself there for a while. And the Pandavas then, in consequence of the death of Bhishma, were engaged in performing his funeral ceremonies. And their time, while thus engaged, seemed too long in passing and performing the last rites to the mortal remains of Bhishma, Karna, and other foremost Kauravas. They gave away large presents to Brahmanas. And then the foremost descendant of Kuru again performed with Dhritarashtra the funeral rites of the heroes slain in battle, and having given away immense wealth to the Brahmanas, the Pandava chief with Dhritarashtra in advance made this entry into the city of Hastinanagar, and consoling his lordly uncle, possessed of eyes of wisdom, that virtuous prince continued to administer the earth with his brothers. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 15. Janamejaya said, O the best of regenerate beings, when the Pandavas had reconquered and pacified their kingdom, what did the two warriors, Vasudeva and Dhananjaya, do? Vyasa said, O Lord of the earth, Vasudeva and Dhananjaya were highly pleased when the Pandavas had succeeded in regaining and pacifying their dominions, and they deported themselves with great satisfaction, like unto Indra and his consort in the celestial regions, and amidst picturesque woodland sceneries, and tablelands of mountains, and sacred places of pilgrimage, and lakes and rivers. They traveled with great pleasure like the two Ashwins in the Nandana garden of Indra. And, O Bharata, the high-souled Krishna and the son of Pandu, Dhananjaya, entering the beautiful hall of assembly at Indraprastha, whiled away their time in great merriment. And there, O Prince, they passed their time in recounting the stirring incidents of the war and the sufferings of their past lives. And those two high-souled ancient sages, glad at heart, recited the genealogy of the races of saints and gods. Then Kesava, knowing the full import of all matters, addressed Partha in a sweet and beautiful speech of excellent style and import. And then Janardana comforted the son of Pritha, afflicted by the death of his sons, and thousands of other relatives. And he of great ascetic merit, and knowing the science of all things having duly consoled him, Arjuna rested for a while, as if a great burden had been removed from his own person. Then Govinda, Krishna, consoling Arjuna with sweet speech, addressed these well-reasoned words to him. Vasudeva said, O Arjuna, the terror of thine enemies, this whole earth has been conquered by the king, the son of Dharma, relying on the power of thy arms. And O the best of men, the virtuous King Yudhishthira now enjoys the sovereignty of the earth without a rival, by the might of Bhimasena and the twin brothers. O thou who knowest what virtue is, it was by righteousness alone that the king has been able to regain his kingdom free from all enemies, thorns, and it was by the action of righteousness that King Suddhodana has been killed in battle, and, O son of Pritha and pillar of the Kuru race, the wicked sons of Dhritarashtra, avaricious, always rude in speech, and bent upon an unrighteous course of conduct, having been exterminated with their followers, the king, the son of Dharma and lord of the earth, now peaceably enjoys the entire kingdom of the earth with thy aid, and I too, O son of Pandu, have been pleasantly whiling away my time in thy company, amidst woodland scenes. O terror of thine enemies, what more need I tell thee, but that where thou and Pritha, and the king, the son of Dharma, and the mighty Bhimasena and the two sons of Madri are, there am I attracted with exquisite delight. O descendant of Kuru, in these delightful and sacred and heaven-like halls of assembly the long time hath fleeted away in thy company without my seeing Vasudeva, Valadeva, and other leaders of the Vrishni race. And now I am desirous of repairing to the city of Dwaravati. Do thou therefore, O most valorous of men, assent to my departure. When King Yudhishthira was smitten heavily with affliction, I with Bhishma have recited to him many appropriate legends suited to the occasion with a view of assuaging his grief, and the pliant and high-minded Yudhishthira, though our sovereign and versed in all lore, paid due heed to our words. That son of Dharma honors truth, and is grateful and righteous, therefore will his virtue and good sense and the stability of his power always endure. And now, O Arjuna, if it pleases thee, do thou go to that high-minded prince and tell him of my intention to depart from this place. For, O thou of mighty arms, even if death cometh to me, I am unwilling to do anything that may displease him, leaving alone my going to the city of Dwaravati. O son of Pritha and descendant of Kuru, I now tell thee truly, desiring to do only what is good and agreeable to thee, and there can be nothing equivocal in it in any way, that the necessity for my staying here no longer exists, because, O Arjuna, that monarch the son of Dhritarashtra hath been slain with his armies and attendants, and the earth, my friend, with its girdle of seas and its mountains and woods and forests, and the kingdom of the Kuru king filled with various gems, have passed under the sway of that wise son of Dharma. And O foremost prince of Bharata's race, may that virtuous prince administer the entire kingdom of the earth in righteousness, and with the respect and approbation of numerous high-souled siddhas, and having his praises always extolled by the court heralds. Do thou, O chieftain of Kuru's race, accompany me today to the presence of the king, the great aggrandizer of the Kuru race, and sound him of my intended return to Dvarka. As Yudhishthira, the high-souled king of the Kurus, always commands my love and respect, I have, O son of Pritha, placed this my body and all the wealth that I have in my house at his disposal. And O Prince Partha, son of Pritha, when this earth has come under thy sway and that of the worshipful Yudhishthira of excellent character, then no longer remains any necessity for my staying here except for my affection for thee. And O monarch, when the redoubtable Arjuna had been thus accosted by the noble-hearted Janardana, he, showing all the honors due to him, sorrowfully replied by merely saying, "Be it so." Anujata Parva. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 16. Janamejaya said, when the high-souled Kesava and Arjuna, after slaying their enemies, repaired to the assembly rooms, what conversation, O regenerate one, took place between them? Vyasa said, the son of Pritha, Arjuna, having recovered his own kingdom, joyously spent his time, without doing anything else, in the company of Krishna, his heart filled with delight, in that palace of celestial beauty. One day, those two listlessly proceeded to a particular part of the palace that looked, O king, like a veritable portion of heaven. Themselves filled with delight, they were then surrounded by their relatives and attendants. Pandu's son, Arjuna, filled with joy in the company of Krishna, surveyed that delightful mansion, and then addressed his companion, saying, O mighty armed one, thy greatness became known to me upon the approach of the battle. O son of Devki, thy form also, as the Lord of the universe, then became known to me. What thy holy self said unto me at that time, O Kesava, through affection, has all been forgotten by me, O chief of men, in consequence of the fickleness of my mind. Repeatedly, however, have I been curious on the subject of those truths. Thou again, O Madhava, wilt repair to Dvarka soon. Vyasa continued, thus addressed by him, Krishna of mighty energy, that foremost of speakers, embraced Phalguna and replied unto him as follows. Vasudeva said, I made thee listen to truths that are regarded as mysteries. I imparted to thee truths that are eternal. Verily, I discoursed to thee on religion in its true form and on all the eternal regions. It is exceedingly disagreeable to me to learn that thou didst not, from folly, receive what I imparted. The recollection of all that I told thee on that occasion will not come to me now. Without doubt, O son of Pandu, thou art destitute of faith and thy understanding is not good. It is impossible for me, O Dhananjaya, to repeat, in detail, all that I said on that occasion. That religion, about which I discoursed to thee then, is more than sufficient for understanding Brahma. I cannot discourse on it again in detail. I discoursed to thee on Supreme Brahma, having concentrated myself in yoga. I shall now, however, recite to thee an old history upon the same topic. O foremost of all persons, observant of duty, listen to everything I now say, so that, with an understanding adapted to my teaching, thou mayst succeed in attaining to the highest end. O chastiser of foes, on one occasion, a Brahmana came to us from the regions of heaven. Of irresistible energy, he came from the regions of the grandsire. He was duly reverenced by us. Listen. O son of Pritha, without yielding to scruples of any kind, to what he, O chief of Bharata's race, said, in answer to our inquiries, agreeably to heavenly forms. The Brahmana said, that which thou askest me, O Krishna, connected with the religion of moksha, emancipation, led by thy compassion for all creatures, and not for thy own good, that, indeed, which destroys all delusion. O thou that art possessed of supreme puissance, I shall now tell thee duly, O slayer of Madhu. Do thou listen with concentrated attention as I discourse to thee, O Madhava. A Brahmana of the name of Kasyapa, possessed of penances and the foremost of all persons conversant with duties, came to a certain other Brahmana who had become conversant with all the mysteries of religion. Indeed, the latter had mastered all the knowledge which the scriptures teach respecting the departure and reappearance of beings, and possessed that direct knowledge of all things which yoga gives. He was well skilled in the truths of all topics relating to the world. He had mastered the truth about pleasure and pain. He knew the truth about birth and death, and understood the distinctions between merit and demerit. He was a beholder of the ends attained to by embodied creatures high and low in consequence of their acts. He lived like one emancipated from the world. Crowned with ascetic success and possessed of perfect tranquility of soul, he had all his senses under complete control. He seemed to blaze with the resplendence of Brahma and was capable of going everywhere at will. He knew the science of disappearing at will from before the eyes of all. He used to rove in the company of invisible siddhas and celestial musicians. He used to sit and converse with them on some spot retired from the bustle of humanity. He was as unattached to all things as the wind. Kasyapa, having heard of him truly, desired to see him. Possessed of intelligence, that foremost of all Brahmanas approached the sage. Himself possessed of penances, Kasyapa, moved by the desire of acquiring merit, fell, with a rapt heart, at the feet of the sage when he had seen all those wonderful attributes. Filled with wonder at the sight of those extraordinary accomplishments, Kasyapa began to wait upon that foremost of all Brahmanas, with the dutiful reverence of a disciple waiting upon his preceptor, and succeeded in propitiating him. By his devotion, O scorcher of foes, rendering to hint the obedience due from a disciple to a preceptor, Kasyapa gratified that Brahmana who possessed all these accomplishments and was endued, besides, with scriptural learning and excellent conduct. Gratified with Kasyapa, that Brahmana one day addressed him cheerfully and spoke as follows, with an eye to the highest success. Listen to those words, O Janardana, as I repeat them. The ascetic crowned with success said, by diverse acts, O son, as also by the aid of merit, mortal creatures attain to diverse ends here and residence in heaven. Nowhere is the highest happiness, nowhere can residence be eternal. There are repeated falls from the highest regions acquired with such sorrow. In consequence of my indulgence in sin, I had to attain to diverse miserable and inauspicious ends, filled as I was with lust and wrath, and deluded by cupidity. I have repeatedly undergone death and rebirth. I have eaten diverse kinds of food, I have sucked at diverse breasts. I have seen diverse kinds of mothers, and diverse fathers dissimilar to one another. Diverse kinds of happiness have been mine, and diverse kinds of misery, O sinless one. On diverse occasions have I been separated from what was agreeable and united with what was disagreeable. Having earned wealth with great toil, I have had to put up with its loss. Insults and excessive misery I have received from king and relatives. Mental and physical pain, of great severity, have been mine. Humiliations I have undergone, and death and immurement under circumstances of great severity. Falls into hell have been mine, and great tortures in the domains of Yama. Decrepitude and diseases have repeatedly assailed me, and calamities, as frequent, in copious measure. In this world I have repeatedly undergone all those afflictions that flow from a perception of all pairs of opposites. After all this, one day, overwhelmed with sorrow, blank despair came upon me. I took refuge in the formless. Afflicted as I was with great distress, I gave up the world with all its joys and sorrows. Understanding then this path, I exercised myself in it in this world. Afterwards, through tranquility of soul, I attained to this success that thou sayest. I shall not have to come to this world again, after my departure hence. Verily, till I attain to absorption into eternal Brahman, till, in fact, the final dissolution of the universe, I shall look on those happy ends that will be mine, and on those beings that constitute this universe. Having acquired this excellent success, I shall, after departing from this world, proceed to what is above it, i.e., Satyaloka, and thence to what is higher, i.e., absorption into Brahman. Verily, I shall attain to the condition, which is unmanifest aspect of Brahman. Let no doubt be thine as regards this. O scorcher of foes, I shall not return to this world of mortal creatures. O thou of great wisdom, I have become gratified with thee. Tell me what I shall do for thee. The time has come for the accomplishment of that purpose for which thou hast come hither. Verily, I know that object for which thou hast sought me. I shall soon depart from this world. Hence it is that I have given thee this hint. O thou of great wisdom and experience, I have been highly gratified with thee for thy behavior. Do thou question me? I shall discourse on what is beneficial to thee, agreeably to thy desire. I think thy intelligence is great. Indeed, I applaud it much, for it was with the aid of that intelligence that thou wert able to recognize me. Surely, O Kasyapa, thou art possessed of great intelligence. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 17. Vasudeva said, touching the feet of that sage, the Brahmana asked him some questions that were exceedingly difficult to answer. That foremost of all righteous persons then discoursed on those duties that were referred to. Kasyapa said, how does the body dissolve away, and how is another acquired? How does one become emancipated after passing through a repeated round of painful rebirths? Enjoying Prakriti for some time, how does Jiva cast off the particular body, which Prakriti gives? How does Jiva, freed from the body, attain to what is different from it, viz., Brahman? How does a human being enjoy and endure the fruits of the good and bad acts done by him? Where do the acts exist of one that is devoid of body? The Brahmana said, thus urged by Kasyapa, the emancipated sage answered those questions one after another. Do thou listen to me, O scion of the Vrishi race, as I recite to thee the answers he made. The emancipated sage said, upon the exhaustion of those acts capable of prolonging life and bringing on fame which are done in a particular body that Jiva assumes, the embodied Jiva, with the span of his life shortened, begins to do acts hostile to life and health. On the approach of destruction, his understanding turns away from the proper course. The man of uncleansed soul, after even a correct apprehension of his constitution and strength and of the season of both his own life and of the year, begins to eat at irregular intervals and to eat such food as is hostile to him. At such a time he indulges in practices that are exceedingly harmful. He sometimes eats excessively and sometimes abstains altogether from food. He eats bad food or bad meat or takes bad drinks or food that has been made up of ingredients incompatible with one another. He eats food that is heavy in excess of the measure that is beneficial or before the food previously taken has been digested. He indulges in physical exercise and sexual pleasure in excess of the due measure, or through avidity for work, suppresses the urgings of his corporeal organism even when they become pronounced. Or, he takes food that is very juicy, or indulges in sleep during daytime. Food that is not properly digested, of itself excites the faults when the time comes. From such excitement of the faults in his body, he gets disease ending in death itself. Sometimes the person engages in perverse or unnatural acts like hanging, for bringing about his death. Through these causes the living body of the creature dissolves away. Understand correctly the manner as I declare it to thee. Urged on by the wind, which becomes violent, the heat in the body, becoming excited and reaching every part of the body one after another, restrains all the movements of the vital breaths. Know truly that excited all over the body, the heat becomes very strong, and pierces every vital part where life may be said to reside. In consequence of this, Jiva, feeling great pain, quickly takes leave of its mortal casement. Know, O foremost of regenerate persons, that when the vital parts of the physical organism become thus afflicted, Jiva slips away from the body, overwhelmed with great pain. All living creatures are repeatedly afflicted with birth and death. It is seen, O chief of Brahmanas, that the pain which is felt by a person when casting off his bodies is like what is felt by him when first entering the womb or when issuing out of it. His joints become almost dislocated, and he derives much distress from the waters of the womb. Urged on by another violent wind, the wind that is in the body becomes excited through cold, and dissolves away the union of matter, called the body, into its respective elements numbering 5. That wind which resides in the vital breaths called prana and apana, occurring within this compound of the 5 primal elements, rushes upwards from a situation of distress, leaving the embodied creature. It is even thus that the wind leaves the body. Then is seen breathlessness. The man then becomes destitute of heat, of breath, of beauty, and of consciousness. Deserted by Brahman, for Jiva is Brahman, the person is said to be dead. By those ducts through which he perceives all sensuous objects, the bearer of the body no longer perceives them. It is the eternal Jiva who creates in the body in those very duets the life breaths that are generated by food. The elements gathered together become in certain parts firmly united. Know that those parts are called the vitals of the body. It is said so in the Sastras. When those vital parts are pierced, Jiva, rising up, enters the heart of the living creature and restrains the principle of animation without any delay. The creature then, though still endued with the principle of consciousness, fails to know anything. The vital parts being all overwhelmed, the knowledge of the living creature becomes overwhelmed by darkness. Jiva then, who has been deprived of everything upon which to stay, is then agitated by the wind. He then, deeply breathing a long and painful breath, goes out quickly, causing the inanimate body to tremble. Dissociated from the body, Jiva, however, is surrounded by his acts. He becomes equipped on every side with all his auspicious acts of merit and with all his sins. Brahmanas endued with knowledge and equipped with the certain conclusions of the scriptures know him from indications as to whether he is possessed of merit or with its reverse. Even as men possessed of eyes behold the firefly appearing and disappearing amid darkness, men possessed of the eye of knowledge and crowned with success of penances, behold, with spiritual vision, Jiva as he leaves the body, as he is reborn, and as he enters the womb. It is seen that Jiva has 3 regions assigned to him eternally. This world where creatures dwell is called the field of action. Accomplishing acts good or bad, all embodied creatures attain to the fruits thereof. In consequence of their own acts, creatures acquire even here superior or inferior enjoyments. Doers of evil deeds here, in consequence of those acts of theirs, attain to hell. This condition of sinking with head downwards, in which creatures are cooked, is one of great misery. It is such that a rescue therefrom is exceedingly difficult. Indeed, one should strive hard for saving oneself from this misery. Those regions where creatures dwell when they ascend from this world I shall now declare truly. Do thou listen to me with attention. By listening to what I say, thou shalt attain to firmness of understanding and a clear apprehension of good and bad acts. Know that even those are the regions of all creatures of righteous deeds, viz., the stellar worlds that shine in the firmament, the lunar disk, and the solar disk as well that shines in the universe in its own light. Upon the exhaustion, again, of their merits, they fall away from those regions repeatedly. There, in heaven itself, is distinction of inferior, superior, and middling felicity. There, in heaven itself, is discontent at sight of prosperity more blazing than one's own. Even these are the goals which I have mentioned in detail. I shall, after this, discourse to you on the attainment by Jiva of the condition of residence in the womb. Do thou hear me, with concentrated attention, O regenerate one, as I speak to thee. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 18. The Brahmana said, the acts, good and bad, that a jiva does are not subject to destruction. Upon attainment of body after body, those acts produce fruits corresponding with them. As a fruit-bearing tree, when the season comes of productivity, yields a large quantity of fruit, similarly merit, achieved with a pure heart, yields a large crop of felicity. After the same fashion, sin, done with a sinful heart, produces a large crop of misery. The soul, or jiva, placing the mind ahead, addresses himself to action. Hear then how jiva, equipped with all his acts and overwhelmed with lust and wrath, enters the womb. The vital seed, mixed with blood, enters the womb of females and becomes the field of jiva, good or bad, born of his acts. In consequence of his subtlety and the condition of being unmanifest, jiva does not become attached to anything even after attaining to a body. Therefore, he is called eternal Brahman. That, viz., jiva or Brahman, is the seed of all creatures. It is in consequence of him that living creatures live. That jiva, entering all the limbs of the fetus part by part, accepting the attribute of mind, and residing within all the regions that belong to prana, supports life. In consequence of this, the fetus becoming endued with mind begins to move its limbs. As liquefied iron, poured into a mold, takes the form of the mold, know that the entrance of jiva into the fetus is even such. As fire, entering a mass of iron, heats it greatly, do thou know that the manifestation of jiva in the fetus is such. As a lamp, burning in a room, discovers all things within it, after the same manner mind discovers the different limbs of the body. Whatever acts, good or bad, jiva does in a former body, have certainly to be enjoyed or endured by him. By such enjoyment and endurance former acts are exhausted, and other acts, again, accumulate, till jivas succeed in acquiring a knowledge of the duties included in that contemplation which leads to emancipation. Regarding this, I shall tell thee those acts by which jiva, O best of men, while coursing through a repeated round of rebirths, becomes happy, gifts, observances of austerity, brahmacharya, bearing Brahman according to the ordinances laid down, self-restraint, tranquility, compassion for all creatures, restraint of passions, abstentions from cruelty as also from appropriating what belongs to others, refraining from doing even mentally all acts that are false and injurious to living creatures. On the earth, reverently serving mother and father, honoring deities and guests, worship of preceptors, pity, purity, constant restraint of all organs, and causing of all good acts, are said to constitute the conduct of the good. From observance of such conduct arises righteousness which protects all creatures eternally. Such conduct one would always behold among persons that are good. Verily, such conduct resides there eternally. That course of practices to which persons of tranquil souls adhere indicates righteousness. Among them is thrown that course of practices which constitutes eternal righteousness. He who would betake himself to that righteousness would never have to attain to a miserable end. It is by the conduct of the good that the world is restrained in the paths of righteousness when it falls away. He that is a yogin is emancipated, and is, therefore, distinguished above these, viz., the good. Deliverance from the world takes place, after a long time, of one who acts righteously and well on every occasion as he should. A living creature thus always meets with the acts done by him in a former life. All these acts constitute the cause and consequence of which he comes into this world in a state different from his true form. There is a doubt in the world as regards the question: by what was the acceptance, by Jiva, of a body first determined? The grandsire of all the worlds, viz., Brahma, having first formed a body of his own, then created the three worlds, in their entirety, of mobile and immobile creatures. Having first himself assumed a body, he then created Pradana. That Pradana is the material cause of all embodied creatures, by whom is all this covered and whom all came to know as the highest. This that is seen is said to be destructible, while the other is immortal and indestructible. This that is seen is said to be Kshara, the destructible, that, however, which is Para, the other, is the immortal, as also Akshara, the indestructible. Of each Purusha taken distributively, the whole is duality among these three. Seen first, to appear in an embodied form, Prajapati, then, created all the primal elements and all immobile creatures. Even this is the ancient audition. Of that acceptance of body, the grandsire ordained a limit in respect of time, and migrations among diverse creatures, and return or rebirth. All that I say is proper and correct, like to what a person who is endued with intelligence and who has seen his soul would say on this topic of previous births. That person who looks upon pleasure and pain as inconstant, which, indeed, is the correct view, who regards the body as an unholy conglomeration, and destruction as ordained in action, and who remembers that what little of pleasure there is really all pain, will succeed in crossing this terrible ocean of worldly migration that is so difficult to cross. Though assailed by decrepitude and death and disease, he that understands Pradana beholds with all equal eye that consciousness which dwells in all beings endued with consciousness. Seeking the supreme seat, he then becomes utterly indifferent to all other things. O best of men, I shall now impart instruction to thee, agreeably to truth, concerning this. Do thou, O learned Brahmana, understand in completeness that which constitutes the excellent knowledge, as I declare it, of that indestructible seat. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 19. The Brahmana said, he who becomes absorbed in the one receptacle of all things, freeing himself from even the thought of his own identity with all things, indeed, ceasing to think of even his own existence, gradually casting off one after another, will succeed in crossing his bonds. That man who is the friend of all, who endures all, who is attached to tranquility, who has conquered all his senses, who is divested of fear and wrath, and who is of restrained soul, succeeds in emancipating himself. He who behaves towards all creatures as towards himself, who is restrained, pure, free from vanity and divested of egoism, is regarded as emancipated from everything. He also is emancipated who looks with an equal eye upon life and death, pleasure and pain, gain and loss, agreeable and disagreeable. He is in every way emancipated who does not covet what belongs to others, who never disregards anybody, who transcends all pairs of opposites, and whose soul is free from attachment. He is emancipated who has no enemy, no kinsman, and no child, who has cast off religion, wealth, and pleasure, and who is freed from desire or cupidity. He becomes emancipated who acquires neither merit nor demerit, who casts off the merits and demerits accumulated in previous births, who wastes the elements of his body for attaining to a tranquilized soul, and who transcends all pairs of opposites. He who abstains from all acts, who is free from desire or cupidity, who looks upon the universe as unenduring or as like an aswatha tree, ever endued with birth, death, and decrepitude, whose understanding is fixed on renunciation, and whose eyes are always directed towards his own faults, soon succeeds in emancipating himself from the bonds that bind him. He that sees his soul void of smell, of taste and touch, of sound, of belongings, of vision, and unknowable, becomes emancipated. He who sees his soul devoid of the attributes of the five elements to be without form and cause, to be really destitute of attributes though enjoying them, becomes emancipated. Abandoning, with the aid of the understanding, all purposes relating to body and mind, one gradually attains to cessation of separate existence, like a fire unfed with fuel. One who is freed from all impressions, who transcends all pairs of opposites, who is destitute of all belongings, and who uses all his senses under the guidance of penances, becomes emancipated. Having become freed from all impressions, one then attains to Brahma, which is eternal and supreme and tranquil and stable and enduring and indestructible. After this I shall declare the science of yoga, to which there is nothing superior, and how yogins, by concentration, behold the perfect soul. I shall declare the instructions regarding it duly. Do thou learn from me those doors by which, directing the soul within the body, one beholds that which is without beginning and end. Withdrawing the senses from their objects, one should fix the mind upon the soul. Having previously undergone the severest austerities, one should practice that concentration of mind which leads to emancipation. Observant of penances and always practicing concentration of mind, the learned Brahmana, endued with intelligence, should observe the precepts of the science of yoga, beholding the soul and the body. If the good man succeeds in concentrating the mind on the soul, he then, habituated to exclusive meditation, beholds the supreme soul in his own soul. Self-restrained, and always concentrated, and with all his senses completely conquered, the man of cleansed soul, in consequence of such complete concentration of mind, succeeds in beholding the soul by the soul. As a person beholding some unseen individual in a dream recognizes him, saying, "This is he," when he sees him after waking, after the same manner the good man, having seen the Supreme Soul in the deep contemplation of samadhi, recognizes it upon waking from samadhi. As one beholds the fibrous pith after extracting it from a blade of the sacrum manja, even so the yogin beholds the soul, extracting it from the body. The body has been called the sacrum manja, and the fibrous pith is said to stand for the soul. This is the excellent illustration propounded by persons conversant with yoga. When the bearer of a body adequately beholds the soul in yoga, he then has no one that is master over him, for he then becomes the lord of the three worlds. He succeeds in assuming diverse bodies according as he wishes. Turning away decrepitude and death, he neither grieves nor exults. The self-restrained man, concentrated in yoga, can create, for himself, the godship of the very gods. Casting off his transient body, he attains to immutable Brahma. No fear springs up in him at even the sight of all creatures falling victims to destruction before his eyes. When all creatures are afflicted, he can never be afflicted by anyone. Devoid of desire and possessed of a tranquil mind, the person in yoga is never shaken by pain and sorrow and fear, the terrible effects that flow from attachment and affection. Weapons never pierce him, death does not exist for him. Nowhere in the world can be seen anyone that is happier than he. Having adequately concentrated his soul, he lives steadily on himself. Turning off decrepitude and pain and pleasure, he sleeps in comfort. Casting off this human body, he attains to other forms according to his pleasure. While one is enjoying the sovereignty that yoga bestows, one should never fall away from devotion to yoga. When one, after adequate devotion to yoga, beholds the soul in oneself, one then ceases to have any regard for even him of 100 sacrifices, Indra. Hear now how one, habituating oneself to exclusive meditation, succeeds in attaining to yoga. Thinking of that point of the compass which has the sun behind it, the mind should be fixed, not outside, but in the interior of that mansion in which one may happen to live. Residing within that mansion, the mind should then, with all its outward and inward operations, behold in that particular room in which one may stay. At that time when, having deeply meditated, one beholds the all, viz., Brahman, the soul of the universe, there is then nothing external to Brahman where the mind may dwell. Restraining all the senses in a forest that is free from noise and that is uninhabited, with mind fixed thereon, one should meditate on the all, or universal Brahman, both outside and inside one's body. One should meditate on the teeth, the palate, the tongue, the throat, the neck likewise. One should also meditate on the heart and the ligatures of the heart. The Brahmana continued, thus addressed by me, that intelligent disciple, O slayer of Madhu, once more asked me about this religion of emancipation that is so difficult to explain. How does this food that is eaten from time to time become digested in the stomach? How does it become transformed into juice? How, again, into blood? How does it nourish the flesh, the marrow, the sinews, the bones? How do all these limbs of embodied creatures grow? How does the strength grow of the growing man? How occurs the escape of all such elements as are not nutritive, and of all impurities separately? How does this one inhale and again exhale? Staying upon what particular part does the soul dwell in the body? How does Jiva, exerting himself, bear the body? Of what color and of what kind is the body in which he dwells again, leaving a particular body? O Holy One, it behoveth thee to tell me all this accurately, O sinless one. Even thus was I interrogated by that learned Brahmana, O Madhava. I replied unto him, O thou of mighty arms, after the manner I myself had heard, O chastiser of all foes. As one placing some precious object in one's storeroom should keep one's mind on it, so, placing the mind within one's own body, one should then, restraining all the senses, seek after the soul, avoiding all heedlessness. One would, becoming always assiduous in this way and gratified with one's own self, within a very short time attain to that Brahma by beholding which one would become conversant with Pradhana. He is not capable of being seized by the eye, nor even by all the senses. It is only with the lamp of the mind that great soul can be seen. He has hands and feet on all sides, he has ears on all sides, he dwells, pervading all things in the world. Jiva beholds the soul as extracted from the body, like the stalk from a blade of saccharum munja, when knowledge comes. Then casting off Brahma as invested with form, by holding the mind in the body, he beholds Brahma as freed from all attributes. He sees the soul with his mind, smiling as it were at the time. Depending upon that Brahma, he then attains to emancipation in me. O foremost of regenerate ones, all this mystery has now been declared by me. I ask thy permission, for I shall leave this spot. Do thou, also, go whithersoever thou pleasest. Thus addressed by me, O Krishna, on that occasion, that disciple of mine, endued with austere penances, that Brahmana of rigid vows, went away according to his pleasure. Vasudeva continued, that best of Brahmanas, O son of Pritha, having said these words unto me, on that occasion, properly relating to the religion of emancipation, disappeared then and there. Has this discourse been heard by thee, O son of Pritha, with mind directed solely towards it? Even this was what thou didst hear on that occasion while thou wert on thy car. It is my opinion, O son of Pritha, that this is difficult of being comprehended by one whose understanding is confused, or who has acquired no wisdom by study, or who eats food incompatible with his body, or whose soul is not purified. O chief of Bharata's race, this is a great mystery among the deities that has been declared to thee. At no time or place, O son of Pritha, has this been heard by man in this world. O sinless one, no other man than thyself is deserving of hearing it. It is not, at this time, capable of being easily understood by one whose inner soul is confused. The world of the deities is filled, O son of Kunti, with those who follow the religion of actions. The cessation of the mortal form, by practicing the religion of inaction, is not agreeable to the deities. That goal, O son of Pritha, is the highest which is constituted by eternal Brahman, where one, casting off the body, attains to immortality and becomes always happy. By adhering to this religion, even they who acts of sinful birth, such as women and Vaishyas and Sudras, attain to the highest goal. What need be said then, O son of Pritha, of Brahmanas and Kshatriyas possessed of great learning, always devoted to the duties of their own orders and who are intent on the acquisition of the region of Brahma? This has been laid down with the reasons on which it rests, and also the means for its acquisition, and its complete attainment and fruit, viz., emancipation and the ascertainment of the truth regarding pain. O chief of Bharata's race, there is nothing else that is fraught with happiness greater than this. That mortal, O son of Pandu, who, endued with intelligence and faith and prowess, renounces as unsubstantial what is regarded as substantial by the world, succeeds within a short time in obtaining the supreme by these means. This is all that is to be said. There is nothing else that is higher than this. Yoga takes place in his case, O son of Pritha, who devotes himself to its constant practice for a period of 6 months. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 20. Vasudeva said, in this connection is cited the ancient narrative, O son of Pritha, of the discourse that took place between a married couple. A certain Brahmana's spouse, beholding the Brahmana, her husband who was a complete master of every kind of knowledge and wisdom, seated in seclusion, said unto him, into what region shall I go, depending on thee as my husband, thee that art seated, having cast off all religious acts, that art harsh in thy conduct towards me, and that art so undiscerning? It has been heard by us that a wife attains to those regions which are acquired by her husband. What, indeed, is the goal that I shall attain, having obtained thee for my husband? Thus questioned, that Brahmana of tranquil soul then said unto her, smilingly, O blessed dame, I am not offended with these words of thine, O sinless one. Whatever acts exist that are adopted with the aid of others, that are seen, in consequence of their grossness, and that are true, are done as acts by men devoted to acts. Those persons that are destitute of knowledge only store delusion by acts. Freedom from acts, again, is incapable of being attained in this world for even a moment. From birth to the attainment of a different form, action good or bad, and accomplished by acts, mind, or speech, exists in all beings. Those paths of action, which are characterized by visible objects, such as soma juice and ghee for libations, being destroyed by Rakshasas, turning away from them I have perceived the seat of the soul, that is in the body. Without the aid of the soul, there dwells Brahma transcending all pairs of opposites, there soma with Agni, and there the urger of the understanding, viz., Vayu, always moves, upholding all creatures. It is for that seat that the grandsire Brahman and others, concentrated in yoga, worship the indestructible. It is for that seat that men of learning and excellent vows, of tranquil souls, and of senses completely vanquished, strive. That is not capable of being smelt by the sense of smell, nor tasted by the tongue, or touched by the organs of touch. It is by the mind that that is attained. It is incapable of being conquered by the eye. It transcends the sense of hearing. It is destitute of scent, taste, touch, and form as attributes. It is that from which proceeds the well-ordained universe, and it is that upon which it rests. The life breaths called prana and apana and samama and vyana and udana flow from it, and it is that into which they again enter. The breaths prana and apana move between samama and vyana. When the soul sleeps, both samama and vyana are absorbed. Between apana and prana, udana dwells, pervading all. Hence, prana and apana do not desert a sleeping person. In consequence of its controlling all the life winds, the controlling breath is called udana. Hence, utterers of Brahman undergo penances which have myself for their goal. In the midst of all those life breaths that swallow up one another and move within the body, blazes forth the fire called Vaiswanara, made up of 7 flames. The nose, the tongue, the eye, the skin, the ear which numbers the 5th, the mind, and the understanding, these are the 7 tongues of that Vaiswanara's flame. That which is smelt, that which is seen, that which is drunk, that which is touched, as also that which is heard, that which is thought of, and that which is understood, these are the 7 sorts of fuel for me. That which smells, that which eats, that which sees, that which touches, that which hears numbering the 5th, that which thinks, and that which understands, these are the 7 great officiating priests. Behold, O blessed one, learned sacrificers duly casting 7 libations in 7 ways in the 7 fires, viz., that which is smelt, that which is drunk, that which is seen, that which is touched, as also that which is heard, that which is thought of, and that which is understood, create them in their own wombs. Earth, wind, ether, water, and light numbering as the 5th, mind, and understanding, these 7 are called wombs of all things. All the attributes which constitute the sacrificial offerings enter into the attribute that is born of the fire, and having dwelt within that dwelling became reborn in their respective wombs. Thither also, viz., in that which generates all beings, they remain absorbed during the period for which dissolution lasts. From that is produced smell, from that is produced taste, from that is produced color, and from that is produced touch, from that is produced sound, from that arises doubt, and from that is produced resolution. This is what is known as the 7-fold creation. It is in this very way that all this was comprehended by the ancients. By the 3 full and final libations, the full become full with light. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 21. The Brahmana said, in this connection is cited the following ancient story. Do thou understand of what kind the institution is of the 10 hatras, sacrificing priests? The ear, the skin, the 2 eyes, the tongue, the nose, the 2 feet, the 2 hands, the genital organ, the lower duct, and speech, these, O beautiful one, are the 10 sacrificing priests. Sound and touch, color and taste, scent, speech, action, motion, and the discharge of vital seed, of urine and of excreta, are the 10 libations. The points of the compass, quarters, wind, sun, moon, earth, fire, Vishnu, Indra, Prajapati, and Mitra, these, O beautiful one, are the 10 sacrificial fires. The 10 organs of knowledge and action are the sacrificing priests. The libations, O beautiful one, are 10. The objects of the senses are the fuel that are cast into these 10 fires, as also the mind, which is the ladle, and the wealth, viz., the good and bad acts of the sacrificer. What remains is the pure, highest knowledge. We have heard that all this universe was well differentiated from knowledge. All objects of knowledge are mind. Knowledge only perceives, i.e., discovers the mind without being attached to it. The knower, or jiva, encased in subtle form, lives within the gross body that is produced by the vital seed. The bearer of the body is the Garhapesha fire. From that is produced another. Mind is the Ahavanya fire. Into it is poured the oblation. From that was produced the Veda, or word, then was born mind. Mind, desirous of creation, sets itself on the Veda, or the word. There arises form, or color, undistinguished by particular colors. It runs towards the mind. The Brahmana's wife said, "Why did word first arise, and why did mind arise afterwards, seeing that word starts into existence after having been thought upon by mind? Upon that authority can it be said that Mati, prana, takes refuge in mind? Why, again, in dreamless slumber, though separated from mind, does not prana apprehend all objects? What is that which restrains it then?" The Brahmana said, "The apana breath, becoming the Lord, i.e., bringing the prana under its control, in consequence of such lordship over it, makes it identical with itself. That restrained motion of the prana breath, which for the time becomes identical with that of the apana, has been said to be the motion of the mind. Hence the mind is dependent upon prana, not prana upon the mind. Therefore, in dreamless slumber, upon the disappearance of mind, prana does not disappear. But since thou askest me a question about word and mind, I shall, therefore, relate to thee a discourse between them." Both word and mind, repairing to the soul of matter, asked him, "Do thou say who amongst us is superior? Do thou, O puissant one, dispel our doubt." On that occasion, the Holy One made this answer, "The mind undoubtedly is superior." Unto him word said, "I yield to thee the fruition of all thy desires." The Brahmana said, "Know that I have two minds, immovable and movable. That which is immovable is, verily, with me, the movable is in your dominion. That mind is verily called movable which, in the form of mantra, letter, or voice, is referable to your dominion. Hence, thou art superior to the other mind which concerns itself with only the external world. But since, coming of thy own accord, O beautiful one, thou enterest into the engagement about the fruition of all wishes, therefore, filling myself with breath, I utter thee." The goddess word used always to dwell between prana and apana. But, O blessed one, sinking into apana, though urged upwards, in consequence of becoming dissociated from prana, she ran to Prajapati and said, "Be gratified with me, O Holy One." The prana appeared, once more fostering word. Hence, word, encountering deep exhalation, never utters anything. Word always flows as endued with utterance or unendued with it. Amongst those two, word without utterance is superior to word with utterance. Like a cow endued with excellent milk, she, word without utterance, yields diverse kinds of meaning. This one always yields the eternal, viz., emancipation, speaking of Brahman. O thou of beautiful smiles, word is a cow, in consequence of her puissance which is both divine and not divine. Behold the distinction of these two subtle forms of word that flow. The Brahmana's wife said, "What did the goddess of word then say, in days of old, when, though impelled by the wish to speak, speech could not come out?" The Brahmana said, "The word that is generated in the body by prana, then attains to apana from prana. Then transformed into udana and issuing out of the body, envelopes all the quarters with vyana. After that, she dwells in samama. Even in this way did word formerly speak." Hence mind, in consequence of being immovable, is distinguished, and the goddess word, in consequence of being movable, is also distinguished. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 22. The Brahmana said, "In this connection is cited the ancient story, O blessed one, of what the institution is of the 7 sacrificing priests. the nose, the eye, the tongue, the skin, and the ear, numbering the fifth, the mind, and the understanding. These are the 7 sacrificing priests standing distinctly from one another. Dwelling in subtle space, they do not perceive one another. Do thou, O beautiful one, know these sacrificing priests that are 7 by their nature? The Brahmana's wife said, How is it that, dwelling in subtle space, these do not perceive one another? What are their respective natures, O Holy One? Do thou tell me this, O Lord? The Brahmana said, Not knowing the qualities of any object is ignorance of that object, while knowledge of the qualities is called knowledge of the object which possesses those qualities. These 7 never succeed in apprehending or knowing the qualities of one another. The tongue, the eye, the ear too, the skin, the mind, and the understanding do not succeed in apprehending smells. It is the nose alone that apprehends them. The nose, the tongue, the ear also, the skin, the mind, and the understanding never succeed in apprehending colors. It is the eye alone that apprehends them. The nose, the tongue, the eye too, the ear, the understanding, and the mind never succeed in apprehending sensations of touch. It is the skin alone that apprehends them. The nose, the tongue, the eye, the skin, the mind, and the understanding never succeed in apprehending sounds. It is the ear alone that apprehends them. The nose, the tongue, the eye, the skin, the ear, and the understanding never succeed in apprehending doubt. It is the mind that apprehends it. The nose, the tongue, the eye, the skin, the ear, and the mind never succeed in apprehending determination, certainty in respect of knowledge. It is the understanding alone that apprehends it. In this connection is cited, O beautiful lady, this ancient narrative of a discourse between the senses and the mind. The mind said, The nose does not smell without me. Without me, the tongue does not apprehend taste. The eye does not seize color, the skin does not feel touch, the ear does not apprehend sound, when deprived of me. I am the eternal and foremost one among all the elements. It always happens that destitute of myself, the senses never shine, like habitations empty of inmates or fires whose flames have been quenched. Without me, all creatures fail to apprehend qualities and objects, with even the senses exerting themselves, even as fuel that is wet and dry, failing to ignite a fire. Hearing these words, the senses said, Even this would be true as thou thinkest in this matter, if, indeed, thou couldst enjoy pleasures without either ourselves or our objects. What thou thinkest would be true if, when we are extinct, there be gratification and support of life, and a continuation of thy enjoyments, or, if, when we are absorbed in objects are existing, thou canst have thy enjoyments by thy desire alone, as truly as thou hast them with our aid. If, again, thou deemest thy power over our objects to be always complete, do thou then seize color by the nose, and taste by the eye. Do thou also take smell by the ear, and sensations of touch by the tongue. Do thou also take sounds by the skin, and likewise touch by the understanding. They that are powerful do not own the dominion of any rules. Rules exist for those only that are weak. Do thou seize enjoyments unenjoyed before, it behoves thee not to enjoy what has been tasted before by others. As a disciple repairs to a preceptor for the sake of acquiring the Shrutis, and then, having acquired the Shrutis, dwells on their import by obeying their injunctions, even so dost thou regard as thine those objects which are shown by us, past or future, in sleep or in wakefulness. Of creatures, again, that are of little intelligence, when their mind becomes distracted and cheerless, life is seen to be upheld upon our objects discharging their functions. It is seen also that a creature, after having formed even innumerable purposes and indulged in dreams, when afflicted by the desire to enjoy, runs to objects of sense at once. One entering upon enjoyments depending on mental purposes alone and unconnected with actual objects of sense, always meets with death upon the exhaustion of the life breaths, like an enkindled fire upon the exhaustion of fuel. True it is that we have connections with our respective attributes. True it is, we have no knowledge of one another's attributes. But without us thou canst have no perception. Without us no happiness can come to thee. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 23. The Brahmana said, in this connection, O blessed lady, is cited the ancient story of what kind the institution is of the 5 sacrificing priests. The learned know this to be a great principle, that prana and apana and udana and samama and vyana are the 5 sacrificing priests. The Brahmana's wife said that naturally there are 7 sacrificing priests is what was my former conviction. Let the great principle be declared to me as to how, verily, the number is 5 of the sacrificing priests. The Brahmana said, the wind nursed by prana afterwards takes birth in apana. The wind nursed in apana then becomes developed into vyana. Nursed by vyana, the wind is then developed into udana. Nursed in udana, the wind is then generated as samama. Those good beings in days of yore asked the firstborn grandsire, saying, do thou say who amongst us is the foremost? He, whom thou wilt indicate, will be our chief. Brahmana said, he upon whose extinction all the life breaths become extinct in the bodies of living creatures, he upon whose moving they move, is verily the foremost among you. Do ye go where ye like? Prana said, upon my extinction all the life breaths become extinct in the bodies of living creatures. Upon my moving they once more move. I am, therefore, the foremost. Behold, I go into extinction. The Brahmana continued, prana then became extinct and once more moved about. Then Samama and Udana also, O blessed one, said these words, thou dost not dwell here, pervading all this, as we do. Thou art not the foremost amongst us, O prana. Only, apana is under thy dominion. Prana then moved about, and unto him Apana spoke. Apana said, when I become extinct, all the life winds become extinct in the bodies of living creatures. When I move about, they again move about. I am, therefore, the foremost. Behold, I go into extinction. The Brahmana continued, unto Apana who said so, both Vyana and Udana said, O Apana, thou art not the foremost. Only, prana is under thy dominion. Then Apana began to move about. Vyana once more addressed him, saying, I am the foremost of all the life winds. Listen, for what reason? When I become extinct, all the life winds become extinct in the bodies of living creatures. When I move about, they once more move about. I am, therefore, the foremost. Behold, I go into extinction. The Brahmana continued, then Vyana went into extinction and once more began to move about. At this, Prana and Apana and Udana and Samama addressed him, saying, Thou art not the foremost among us, O Vyana. Only, Samama is under thy dominion. Vyana then began to move about, and Samama said unto him, I am the foremost of you all. Listen, for what reason? When I become extinct, all the life winds become extinct in the bodies of living creatures. When I begin to move about, they once more move about. Hence, I am the foremost. Behold, I go into extinction. Then Samama began to move about. Unto him Udana said, I am the foremost of all the life winds. Listen, for what reason? When I become extinct, all the life winds become extinct in the bodies of living creatures. When I move about, they once more move about. Hence, I am the foremost. Behold, I go into extinction. Then Udana, after having gone into extinction, began once more to move about. Prana and Apana and Samama and Vyana said unto him, O Udana, thou art not the foremost one among us, only Vyana is under thy dominion. The Brahmana continued, unto them assembled together, the Lord of creatures, Brahma, said, No one of you is superior to others. Ye are all endued with particular attributes. All are foremost in their own spheres, and all possess special attributes. Thus said unto them that were assembled together, the Lord of all creatures. There is one that is unmoving, and one that is moving. In consequence of special attributes, there are 5 life winds. My own self is one. That one accumulates into many forms. Becoming friendly unto one another, and gratifying one another, depart in peace. Blessings to ye, do ye uphold one another? Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 24. The Brahmana said, in this connection is cited the ancient story of the discourse between Narada and the Rishi Devamata. Devamata said, What verily comes first into existence of a creature that takes birth? Is it Prana, or Apana, or Samama, or Vyana, or Udana? Narada said, By whatever the creature is created, that first comes unto him which is other, or separate from him. The life winds are to be known as existing in pairs, viz., those that move transversely, upwards, and downwards. Devamata said, By whom, among the life winds, is a creature produced? Who, amongst them, comes first? Do thou tell me what the pairs are of the life winds that move transversely, upwards, and downwards. Narada said, From Sankalpa, wish, arises pleasure. It also arises from sound. It arises also from taste. It arises too from color. From the semen, united with blood, first flows prana. Upon the semen being modified by prana, flows apana. Pleasure arises from the semen as well. It arises from taste also. This is the form, effect, of Udana. Pleasure is produced from union. Semen is generated by desire. From desire is produced the menstrual flow. In the union of semen and blood, generated by Samama and Vyana, the pair that consists of prana and apana enters, moving transversely and upwards. Vyana and Samama both form a pair that moves transversely. Agni, fire, is all the deities. Even this is the teaching of the Veda. The knowledge of Agni arises in a Brahmana with intelligence. The smoke of that fire is of the form of the attribute called darkness. The attribute that is known by the name of passion is in its ashes. The quality of goodness arises from that portion of the fire into which the oblation is poured. They that are conversant with sacrifices know that Samama and Vyana are from the attribute of goodness. Prana and Apana are portions of the oblation of clarified butter. Between them is the fire. That is the excellent form, or seat, of Udana, as the Brahmanas know. Listen as I say which is distinct from the pairs. Day and night constitute a pair. Between them is the fire. That is the excellent seat of Udana as the Brahmanas know. The existent and the non-existent form a pair. Between them is the fire. That is the excellent seat of Udana as the Brahmanas know. First is Samama, then Vyana. The latter's function is managed through it, viz., Samama. Then, secondly, Samama once more comes into operation. Only Vyana exists for tranquility. Tranquility is eternal Brahman. This is the excellent seat of Udana as the Brahmanas know. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 25. The Brahmana said, In this connection is recited the ancient story of what the institution is of the Chatarotra, sacrifice. The ordinances are now being duly declared of that in its entirety. Listen to me, O amiable lady, as I declare this wonderful mystery. The agent, the instrument, the action and emancipation, these, O beautiful lady, are the four sacrificing priests by whom the universe is enveloped. Here in its entirety the assignment of causes relating to this topic. The nose, the tongue, the eye, the skin, the ear numbering the fifth, the mind, and the understanding, these seven should be understood as being caused by the knowledge of qualities. Smell, taste, color, sound, touch, numbering the fifth, the objects of the mind, and the objects of the understanding, these seven are caused by action. He who smells, he who eats, he who sees, he who speaks, he who hears, numbering the fifth, he who thinks, and he who understands, these seven should be known as caused by the agent. Possessed of qualities, these enjoy their own qualities, agreeable or disagreeable. As regards the soul, that is destitute of qualities. These seven are the causes of emancipation. With them that are learned and possessed of sufficient understanding, the qualities, which are in the position of deities, eat the oblations, each in its proper place, and agreeably to what has been ordained. The person who is destitute of learning, eating diverse kind of food, becomes seized with the sense of mindness. Digesting food for himself, he becomes ruined through the sense of mindness. The eating of food that should not be eaten, and the drinking of wine, ruin him. He destroys the food he takes, and having destroyed that food, he becomes destroyed himself. The man of learning, however, being possessed of puissance, destroys his food for reproducing it. The minutest transgression does not arise in him from the food he takes. Whatever is thought of by the mind, whatever is uttered by speech, whatever is heard by the ear, whatever is seen by the eye, whatever is touched by the sense of touch, whatever is smelt by the nose, constitute oblations of clarified butter, which should all, after restraining the senses with the mind numbering the sixth, be poured into that fire of high merits which burns within the body, viz., the soul. The sacrifice constituted by yoga is going on as regards myself. The spring whence that sacrifice proceeds is that which yields the fire of knowledge. The upward life-wind prana is the stotra of that sacrifice. The downward life-wind apana is its sastra. The renunciation of everything is the excellent dakshina of that sacrifice. Consciousness, mind, and understanding, these becoming Brahma, are its hatri, advaryu, and udgatri. The prasastri, his sastra, is truth. Cessation of separate existence, or emancipation, is the dakshina. In this connection, people conversant with Narayana recite some riches. Unto the divine Narayana were animals offered in days of yore, then are sung some samamas. On that topic occurs an authority. O timid one, know that the divine Narayana is the soul of all. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 26. The Brahmana said, there is one ruler. There is no second beside him. He that is ruler resides in the heart. I shall speak now of him. Impelled by him, I move as directed, like water along an inclined plane. There is one preceptor. There is no second beside him. He resides in the heart, and of him I shall now speak. Be instructed by that preceptor. They who are always endued with feelings of animosity are like snakes. There is one kinsman. There is no second beside him. He resides in the heart, of him I shall now speak. Instructed by him, kinsmen become possessed of kinsmen, and the seven rishis, O son of Pritha, shine in the firmament. There is one dispeller. There is no second beside him. He resides in the heart. Of him I shall now speak. Having lived with that instructor under the proper mode of living, Sakra attained to the sovereignty of all the worlds. There is one enemy. There is no second beside him. He resides in the heart. Of him I shall now speak. Instructed by that preceptor, all snakes in the world are always endued with feelings of animosity. In this connection is cited the ancient story of the instruction of the snakes, the deities, and the rishis by the Lord of all creatures. The deities and the rishis, the snakes, and the asuras, seated around the Lord of all creatures, asked him, saying, "Let that which is highly beneficial for us be declared." Unto them that inquired about what is highly beneficial, the Holy One uttered only the word Om, which is Brahman in one syllable. Hearing this, they ran away in various directions. Amongst them that thus ran in all directions from desire of self-instruction, the disposition first arose in snakes of biting. Of the asuras, the disposition, born of their nature for ostentations, pride arose. The deities betook themselves to gifts, and the great rishis to self-restraint. Having repaired to one teacher, and having been instructed, refined, by one word, the snakes, the deities, the rishis, and the Danavas, all betook themselves to diverse different dispositions. It is that one who hears himself when speaking, and apprehends it duly. Once, again, is that heard from him when he speaks. There is no second preceptor. It is in obedience to his counsels that action afterwards flows. The instructor, the apprehender, the hearer, and the enemy are pleased within the heart. By acting sinfully in the world, it is he that becomes a person of sinful deeds. By acting auspiciously in the world, it is he who becomes a person of auspicious deeds. It is he who becomes a person of unrestrained conduct by becoming addicted to the pleasures of sense, impelled by desire. It is he who becomes a Brahmacharan by always devoting himself to the subjugation of his senses. It is he, again, that casts off vows and actions and takes refuge on Brahman alone. By moving in the world, identifying himself the while with Brahman, he becomes a Brahmacharan. Brahman is his fuel, Brahman is his fire, Brahman is his origin, Brahman is his water, Brahman is his preceptor, he is wrapped in Brahman. Brahmacharya is even so subtle as understood by the wise. Having understood it, they betook themselves to it, instructed by the Kshatrajna. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 27. The Brahmana said, having crossed that impassable fastness, the world, which has purposes for its gadflies and mosquitoes, grief and joy for its cold and heat, heedlessness for its blinding darkness, cupidity and diseases for its reptiles, wealth for its one danger on the road, and lust and wrath its robbers, I have entered the extensive forest of Brahman. The wife of the Brahmana said, "Where is that foremost, O thou of great wisdom? What are its trees? What its rivers? What its mountains and hills? How far is that forest?" The Brahmana said, "There exists nothing that is separate from it. There is nothing more delightful than it. There is nothing that is unseparated from it. There is nothing more afflicting than it. There is nothing smaller than that. There is nothing vaster than that. There is nothing minuter than that. There is no happiness that can resemble it. Regenerate persons, entering into it, at once transcend both joy and sorrow. They, then, never stand in fear of any creature, nor does any creature stand in fear of them. In that forest are 7 large trees, 7 fruits, and 7 guests. There are 7 hermitages, 7 forms of yoga concentration, and 7 forms of initiation. Even this a description of that forest. The trees which stand filling that forest produce excellent flowers and fruits of 5 colors. The trees which stand there filling that forest produce flowers and fruits that are of excellent colors, and that are, besides, of two kinds. The trees which stand there filling that forest produce flowers and fruits that are endued with fragrance, and that are, besides, of two colors. The trees which stand there filling that forest produce flowers and fruits that are possessed of fragrance, and that are, besides, of one color. The two trees which stand filling that forest produce many flowers and fruits that are of unmanifest colors. There is one fire here, possessed of a good mind. That is connected with Brahmana. The five senses are the fuel here. The seven forms of emancipation flowing from them are the seven forms of initiation. The qualities are the fruits, and the guests eat those fruits. There, in diverse places, the great rishis accept hospitality. When they, having been worshipped, become annihilated, then another forest shines forth. In that forest, intelligence is the tree, emancipation is the fruit, tranquility is the shade of which it is possessed. It has knowledge for its resting house, contentment for its water, and the kshatrajna for its sun. Its end cannot be ascertained upwards, downwards, or horizontally. 7 females always dwell there, with faces downwards, possessed of effulgence, and endued with the cause of generations. They take up all the different tastes from all creatures, even as inconstancy sucks up truth. In that itself dwell, and from that emerge, the 7 rishis who are crowned with ascetic success, with those 7 having Vasishtha for their foremost. Glory, effulgence, greatness, enlightenment, victory, perfection, and energy, these 7 always follow this same like rays following the sun. Hills and mountains also exist there, collected together, and rivers and streams bearing waters in their course, waters that are born of Brahma. And there happens a confluence also of streams in the secluded spot for sacrifice. Thence those that are contented with their own souls proceed to the grandsire. Those whose wishes have been reduced, whose wishes have been directed to excellent vows, and whose sins have been burnt off by penances, merging themselves in their souls, succeed in attaining to Brahman. Tranquility is praised by those who are conversant with the forest of knowledge. Keeping that forest in view, they take birth so as not to lose courage. Even such is that sacred forest that is understood by Brahmanas, and understanding it, they live, in accordance with the ordinance, directed by the Kshatrajna. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 28. The Brahmana said, I do not smell scents. I do not perceive tastes. I do not see colors. I do not touch. I do not likewise hear the diverse sounds that arise. Nor do I entertain purposes of any kind. It is nature that desires such objects as are liked. It is nature that hates such objects as are disliked. Desire and aversion spring from nature, after the manner of the upward and the downward life winds, when souls have entered animate bodies. Separated from them are others, in them are eternal dispositions. These is also the soul of all creatures, yogins would behold in the body. Dwelling in that, I am never attached to anything through desire and wrath, and decrepitude and death. Not having any desire for any object of desire, and not having any aversion for any evil, there is no taint on my natures, as there is no taint of a drop of water on the leaves of the lotus. Of this constant principle, which looks upon diverse natures, they are in constant possessions. Though actions are performed, yet the assemblage of enjoyments does not attach itself to them, even as the assemblage of rays of the sun does not attach to the sky. In this connection is recited an ancient story of a discourse between an Adwaryu and a Yati. Do thou hear it, O glorious lady. Beholding an animal sprinkled with water at a sacrificial ceremony, a Yati said unto the Adwaryu seated there these words in censure, This is destruction of life. Unto him the Adwaryu said in reply, "This goat will not be destroyed. The animal, sacrificed, meets with great good, if the Vedic declaration on this subject be true. That part of this animal which is of earth will go to earth. That part of this one which is born of water will enter into water. His eye will enter the sun, his ear will enter the different points of the horizon, his life winds will enter the sky. I who adhere to the scriptures incur no fault by assisting at the killing of this animal." The Yati said, "If thou beholdest such good to the goat in this dissociation with his life winds, then this sacrifice is for the goat. What need hast thou for it? Let the brother, father, mother, and friend of this goat give thee their approval in this. Taking him to them, do thou consult them. This goat is especially dependent. It behoveth thee to see them who can give their consent in this. After hearing their consent, the matter will become fit for consideration. The life winds of this goat have been made to return to their respective sources. Only the inanimate body remains behind. This is what I think. Of those who wish to enjoy felicity by means of the inanimate body of an animal, which is comparable with fuel, the fuel of sacrifice is after all the animal himself. Abstention from cruelty is the foremost of all deities. Even this is the teaching of the elders. We know this is the proposition, viz., no slaughter, of living creatures. If I say anything further, it will then appear that diverse kinds of faulty actions are capable of being done by thee. Always abstaining from cruelty to all creatures is what meets with our approbation. We establish this from what is directly perceptible. We do not rely on what is beyond direct perception. The Adwaryu said, "Thou enjoyest the properties of smell which belong to the earth. Thou drinkest the tastes which appertain to water. Thou sayest colors which belong to lighted bodies. Thou touchest the properties which have their origin in wind. Thou hearest the sounds which have their origin in space or ether. Thou thinkest thoughts with the mind. All these entities, thou art of opinion, have life. Thou dost not then abstain from taking life. Really, thou art engaged in slaughter. There can be no movement without slaughter. Or, what dost thou think, O regenerate one?" The Yati said, "The indestructible and the destructible constitute the double manifestation of the soul. Of these the indestructible is existed. The destructible is said to be exceedingly non-existent. The life wind, the tongue, the mind, the quality of goodness, along with the quality of passion, are all existent. The Atman is above these forms and hence is without duality and hope. As regards one that is freed from these existent objects, that transcends all pairs of opposites, that does not cherish any expectation, that is alike to all creatures, that is liberated from the idea of meum, that has subjugated his self, and that is released from all his surroundings, for him no fear exists from any source." The Adwaryu said, "O foremost of intelligent men, one should reside with those that are good. Hearing thy opinion, my understanding shines with light. O illustrious one, I come to thee, believing thee to be a god, and I say I have no fault, O regenerate one, by performing these rites with the aid of mantras." The Brahmana continued, "With this conclusion, the Yati remained silent after this. The Adwaryu also proceeded with the great sacrifice, freed from delusion. The Brahmanas understand emancipation, which is exceedingly subtle, to be of this kind, and having understood it, they live accordingly directed by the Kshatrajna, that beholder of all topics." Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 29. The Brahmana said, "In this connection is cited the ancient story, O lady, of the discourse between Kartavirya and the ocean. There was a king of the name of Kartavirya Arjuna who was endued with 1,000 arms. He conquered, with his bow, the earth, extending to the shores of the ocean. It has been heard by us that, once on a time, as he was walking on the shores of the sea, proud of his might, he showered hundreds of shafts on that vast receptacle of waters. The ocean, bowing down unto him, said, with joined hands, "Do not, O hero, shoot thy shafts at me. Say, what shall I do to thee? With these mighty arrows shot by thee, those creatures which have taken shelter in me are being killed, O tiger among kings. Do thou, O Lord, grant them security." Arjuna said, "If any wielder of the bow exists that is equal to me in battle, and that would stand against me in the field, do thou name him to me." The ocean said, "If thou hast heard, O king, of the great Rishi Jamadagni, his son is competent to duly receive thee as a guest." Then that king proceeded, filled with great wrath. Arrived at that retreat, he found Rama himself. With his kinsmen he began to do many acts that were hostile to Rama, and caused much trouble to that high-souled hero. Then the energy, which was immeasurable, of Rama blazed forth, burning the troops of the foe, O lotus-eyed one. Taking up his battle-axe, Rama suddenly put forth his power, and hacked that thousand-armed hero, like a tree of many branches. Beholding him slain and prostrated on the earth, all his kinsmen, uniting together, and taking up their darts, rushed at Rama, who was then seated, from all sides. Rama also, taking up his bow and quickly ascending on his car, shot showers of arrows and chastised the army of the king. Then some of the Kshatriyas, afflicted with the terror of Jamadagni's son, entered mountain fastnesses, like deer afflicted by the lion. Of them that were unable, through fear of Rama, to discharge the duties ordained for their order, the progeny became Vrishalas owing to their inability to find Brahmanas. In this way Dravidas and Abhiras and Pundras, together with the Savaras, became Vrishalas through those men who had Kshatriya duties assigned to them, in consequence of their birth, falling away from those duties. Then the Kshatriyas that were begotten by the Brahmanas upon Kshatriya women that had lost their heroic children were repeatedly destroyed by Jamadagni's son. The slaughter proceeded 21 times. At its conclusion a bodiless voice, sweet and proceeding from heaven, and which was heard by all people, spoke to Rama, "O Rama, O Rama, desist. What merit dost thou see, O son, in thus destroying repeatedly these inferior Kshatriyas?" In this way, O blessed dame, his grandsires, headed by Richika, addressed that high-souled one, saying, "Do thou desist." Rama, however, unable to forgive the slaughter of his sire, replied unto those rishis, saying, "It behoves you not to forbid me." The Pitris then said, "O foremost of all victorious men, it behoves thee not to slay these inferior Kshatriyas. It is not proper that thyself, being a Brahmana, should slay these kings." Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 30. The Pitris said, "In this connection is cited this old history. Having heard it, thou shouldst act according to it, O foremost of all regenerate persons." There was a royal sage of the name Alarka endued with the austerest of penances. He was conversant with all duties, truthful in speech, of high soul, and exceedingly firm in his vows. Having, with his bow, conquered the whole earth extending to the seas, and thereby achieved an exceedingly difficult feat, he set his mind on that which is subtle. While sitting at the root of a tree, his thoughts, O thou of great intelligence, abandoning all those great feats, turned towards that which is subtle. Alarka said, "My mind has become strong." Having conquered the mind, one's conquest becomes permanent. Though surrounded by foes, I shall, henceforth, shoot my arrows at other objects. Since in consequence of its unsteadiness, it sets all mortals to accomplish acts, I shall shoot very sharp-pointed shafts at the mind. The mind said, "These arrows, O Alarka, will never pierce me through. They will pierce only thy own vital parts. Thy vital parts being pierced, thou shalt die. Do thou look out for other arrows with which to destroy me." Hearing these words and reflecting upon them, he said as follows. Alarka said, "Smelling very many perfumes, the nose hankers after them only. Hence I shall shoot whetted arrows at the nose." The nose said, "These arrows will never cross through me, O Alarka. They will pierce only thy own vital parts, and thy vital parts being pierced, thou shalt die. Do thou look for other arrows with which to destroy me." Hearing these words and reflecting upon them, he said as follows. Alarka said, "This one, viz., the tongue, enjoying savory tastes, hankers after them only. Hence I shall shoot whetted shafts at the tongue." The tongue said, "These arrows, O Alarka, will not cross through me. They will only pierce thy own vital parts, and thy vital parts being pierced, thou shalt die. Do thou look for other arrows with which to destroy me." Hearing these words and reflecting upon them, he said as follows. Alarka said, "The skin, touching diverse objects of touch, hankers after them only. Hence, I shall tear off the skin with diverse arrows equipped with the feathers of the canker." The skin said, "These arrows will not, O Alarka, cross through me. They will pierce thy own vital parts only, and thy vital parts being pierced, thou shalt die. Do thou look for other arrows with which to destroy me." Hearing these words and reflecting on them, he said as follows. Alarka said, "Hearing diverse sounds, the ear hankers after them only. Hence, I shall shoot whetted shafts at the ear." The ear said, "These arrows will not, O Alarka, cross through me. They will pierce thy own vital parts only, and thy vital parts being pierced, thou shalt die. Do thou then look for other arrows with which to destroy me." Hearing these words and reflecting upon them, he said as follows. Alarka said, "Seeing many colors, the eye hankers after them only. Hence, I shall destroy the eye with sharp-pointed arrows." The eye said, "These arrows will not, O Alarka, cross through me at all. They will pierce thy own vital parts only, and thy vital parts being pierced, thou shalt die. Do thou then look for other arrows with which to destroy me." Hearing these words and reflecting upon them, he said as follows. Alarka said, "This, viz., the understanding, forms many determinations with the aid of ratiocination. Hence, I shall shoot whetted arrows at the understanding." The understanding said, "These arrows will not, O Alarka, cross through me at all. They will pierce thy vital parts only, and thy vital parts being pierced, thou shalt die. Do thou then look for other arrows with which to destroy me." The Brahmana continued, "Then Alarka, employing himself, even there, on penances difficult to perform and exceedingly austere, failed to obtain, by the high power of his penances, arrows for casting at these seven. Endued with puissance, he then, with mind well concentrated, began to reflect. Then, O best of regenerate ones, Alarka, that foremost of intelligent men, having reflected for a long time, failed to obtain anything better than yoga. Setting his mind on one object, he remained perfectly still, engaged in yoga. Endued with energy, he quickly slew all the senses with one arrow, having entered by yoga into his soul and thereby attained to the highest success." Filled with wonder, that royal sage then sang this verse, "Alas, it is a pity that we should have accomplished all acts that are external. Alas, that we should have, endued with the thirst for enjoyment, courted the pleasures of sovereignty before now. I have learnt this afterwards. There is no happiness that is higher than yoga. Do thou know this, O Rama? Cease to slay the Kshatriyas. Do thou practice the austerest of penances? Thou wilt then attain to what is good. Thus addressed by his grandsires, Jamadagni's son practiced the austerest penances, and having practiced them, that highly blessed one attained to that success which is difficult to reach. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 31. The Brahmana said, "There are three foes in the world. They are said to be ninefold, agreeably to their qualities. Exultation, satisfaction, and joy, these three qualities appertain to goodness. Cupidity, wrath, and hatred, these three qualities are said to appertain to passion. Lassitude, procrastination, and delusion, these three qualities appertain to darkness. Cutting these with showers of arrows, the man of intelligence, free from procrastination, possessed of a tranquil soul, and with his senses under subjection, ventures to vanquish others." In this connection, persons conversant with the occurrence of ancient cycles recite some verses which were sung in days of old by King Amvarisha, who had acquired a tranquil soul. When diverse kinds of faults were in the ascendant, and when the righteous were afflicted, Amvarisha of great fame put forth his strength for assuming sovereignty. Subduing his own faults and worshipping the righteous, he attained to great success and sang these verses: "I have subdued many faults. I have killed all foes. But there is one, the greatest, vice which deserves to be destroyed, but which has not been destroyed by me." Urged by that fault, this jiva fails to attain to freedom from desire. Afflicted by desire, one runs into ditches without knowing it. Urged by that fault, one indulges in acts that are forbidden. Do thou cut off, that cupidity with sharp-edged swords. From cupidity arise desires. From desire flows anxiety. The man who yields to desire acquires many qualities that appertain to passion. When these have been acquired, he gets many qualities that appertain to darkness. In consequence of those qualities, he repeatedly takes birth, with the bonds of body united, and is impelled to action. Upon the expiration of life, with body becoming dismembered and scattered, he once meets with death, which is due to birth itself. Hence, duly understanding this, and subduing cupidity by intelligence, one should desire for sovereignty in one's soul. This is true sovereignty. There is no other sovereignty here. The soul, properly understood, is the king. Even these were the verses sung by King Ambarisha of great celebrity on the subject of sovereignty, which he kept before him, that king who had cut off the one foremost fault, viz., cupidity. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 32. The Brahmana said, in this connection is cited the old narrative, O lady, of the discourse between a Brahmana and King Janaka. King Janaka, on a certain occasion, desirous of punishing him, said unto a Brahmana who had become guilty of some offense, "Thou shalt not dwell within my dominions." Thus addressed, the Brahmana replied unto that best of kings, saying, "Tell me, O king, what the limits are of the territory subject to thee." "I desire, O Lord, to dwell within the dominions of another king." "Verily, I wish to obey thy behest, O Lord of earth, agreeably to the scriptures." Thus addressed by that celebrated Brahmana, the king, hearing repeated and hot sighs, said not a word in reply. Like the planet Rahu overwhelming the sun, a cloudedness of understanding suddenly overwhelmed that king of immeasurable energy as he sat plunged in thought. When that cloudedness of understanding passed away and the king became comforted, he spoke after a short while these words unto that Brahmana. Janaka said, "Although a large, inhabited tract is subject to me within this ancestral kingdom of mine, yet I fail to find my dominion, searching through the whole earth. When I failed to find it on the earth, I then searched Mithila for it. When I failed to find it in Mithila, I then searched for it among my own children. When I failed to find it even there, a cloudedness of understanding came over me. After that cloudedness of understanding passed away, intelligence came back to me. Then I thought that I have no dominion, or that everything is my dominion. Even this body is not mine, or the whole earth is mine. At the same time, O best of regenerate persons, I think that that is as much mine as it is of others. Do thou, therefore, dwell here as long as thy choice leads thee, and do thou enjoy as long as thou pleasest. The Brahmana said, when there is a large inhabited tract in thy ancestral kingdom, tell me, depending upon what understanding, has the idea of meum been got rid of by thee? What also is that understanding depending upon which thou hast come to the conclusion that everything constitutes thy dominion? What, indeed, is the notion through which thou hast no dominion, or everything is thy dominion? Janaka said, all conditions here, and all affairs, have been understood by me to be terminable. Hence, I could not find that which should be called mine. Considering, whose is this, I thought of the Vedic text about anybody's property. I could not, therefore, find, by my understanding, what should be called mine. Depending upon this notion, I got rid of idea of mineness. Hear now what that notion is depending upon which I came to the conclusion that I have dominion everywhere. I do not desire for my own self those smells that are even in my nose. Therefore, the earth, subjugated by me, is always subject to me. I do not desire for my own self those tastes that exist in contact with even my tongue. Therefore, water, subjugated by me, is always subject to me. I do not desire for my own self the color or light that appertains to my eye. Therefore, light subjugated by me is always subject to me. I do not desire for my own self those sensations of touch which are in contact with even my skin. Therefore, the wind, subjugated by me, is always subject to me. I do not desire for my own self those sounds which are in contact with even my ear. Therefore, sounds, subjugated by me, are always subject to me. I do not desire for my own self the mind that is always in my mind. Therefore, the mind, subjugated by me, is subject to me. All these acts of mine are for the sake of the deities, the Pitris, the Buddhas, together with guests. The Brahmana then, smiling, once more said unto Janaka, know that I am Dharma, who have come here today for examining thee. Thou art verily the one person for setting this wheel in motion, this wheel that has the quality of goodness for its circumference, Brahman for its nave, and the understanding for its spokes, and which never turns back. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 33. The Brahmana said, I do not, O timid one, move in this world in that manner which thou, according to thy own understanding, censurest. I am a Brahmana possessed of Vedic knowledge. I am emancipated. I am a forest recluse. I am an observer of the duties of a householder. I observe vows. I am not what thou sayest me in good and bad acts. By me is pervaded everything that exists in this universe. Whatever creatures exist in the world, mobile or immobile, know that I am the destroyer of them all, even as fire is the destroyer of all kinds of wood. Of sovereignty over the whole earth or over heaven, on the one hand, or this knowledge of my identity with the universe, this knowledge is my wealth. This is the one path for Brahmanas, by which they who understand it proceed to households, or abodes in the forest, or residence with preceptors, or among mendicants. With numerous unconfused symbols, only one knowledge is worshipped. Those who, whatever the symbols and modes of life to which they adhere, have acquired an understanding having tranquility for its essence, attain to that one entity even as numerous rivers all meeting the ocean. The path is traversable with the aid of the understanding and not of this body. Actions have both beginning and end, and the body has actions for its bonds. Hence, O blessed lady, thou needst have no apprehension in respect of the world hereafter. With thy heart intent upon the real entity, it is my soul into which thou wilt come. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 34. The Brahmana's wife said, "This is incapable of being understood by a person of little intelligence as also by one whose soul has not been cleansed. My intelligence is very little, and contracted, and confused. Do thou tell me the means by which the knowledge of which thou speakest may be acquired. I wish to learn from thee the source from which this knowledge flows." The Brahmana said, "Know that intelligence devoted to Brahman is the lower Rani, the preceptor is the upper Rani, penances and conversance with tithe scriptures are to cause the attrition. From this is produced the fire of knowledge." The Brahmana's wife said, "As regards this symbol of Brahman, which is designated Kshatrajna, where, indeed, occurs a description of it by which it is capable of being seized." The Brahmana said, "He is without symbols, and without qualities. Nothing exists that may be regarded as his cause. I shall, however, tell thee the means by which he can be seized or not. A good means may be found, viz., perception of hearing, etc., as flowers are perceived by bees. That means consists of an understanding cleansed by action. Those whose understandings have not been so cleansed regard that entity, through their own ignorance, as invested with the properties of knowledge and others. It is not laid down that this should be done, of that this should not be done, in the rules for achieving emancipation, those, that is, in which a knowledge of the soul arises only in him who sees and hears. One should comprehend as many parts, unmanifest and manifest by hundreds and thousands, as one is capable of comprehending here. Indeed, one should comprehend diverse objects of diverse import, and all objects of direct perception. Then will come, from practice, of contemplation and self-restraint, etc., that above which nothing exists." The Holy One continued, "Then the mind of that Brahmana's wife, upon the destruction of the Kshatrajna, became that which is beyond Kshatrajna, in consequence of the knowledge of Kshetra." Arjuna said, "Where, indeed, is that Brahmana's wife, O Krishna, and where is that foremost of Brahmanas, by both of whom was such success attained? Do thou tell me about them, O thou of unfading glory." The Blessed and Holy One said, "Know that my mind is the Brahmana, and that my understanding is the Brahmana's wife. He who has been spoken of as Kshatrajna is I myself, O Dhananjaya." Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 35. Arjuna said, "It behoveth thee to expound Brahma to me, that which is the highest object of knowledge. Through thy favor, my mind is delighted with these subtle disquisitions." Vasudeva said, "In this connection is recited the old history of the discourse between a preceptor and his disciple on the subject of Brahman. Once on a time, O scorcher of foes, an intelligent disciple questioned a certain Brahmana of rigid vows who was his preceptor, as he was seated, at his ease, saying, 'What, indeed, is the highest good?' Desirous of attaining to that which constitutes the highest good, I throw myself at thy feet, O Holy One. O learned Brahmana, I solicit thee, bending my head, to explain to me what I ask, unto that disciple, O son of Pritha, who said so." The preceptor said, "O regenerate one, I shall explain to thee everything about which thou mayst have any doubts." Thus addressed, O foremost one of Kuru's race, by his preceptor, that disciple who was exceedingly devoted to his preceptor, spoke as follows, with joined hands. "Do thou hear what he said, O thou of great intelligence?" The disciple said, "Where am I? Whence art thou? Explain that which is the highest truth. From what source have sprung all creatures mobile and immobile? By what do creatures live? What is the limit of their life? What is truth? What is penance, O learned Brahmana? What are called attributes by the good? What paths are to be called auspicious? What is happiness? What is sin? O Holy One, O Thou of excellent vows, it behoves thee to answer these questions of mine, O learned Rishi, correctly, truly, and accurately. Who else is there in this world than thee that is capable of answering these questions? Do thou answer them, O foremost of all persons conversant with duties. My curiosity is great. Thou art celebrated in all the worlds as one well skilled in the duties relating to emancipation. There is none else than thou that is competent to remove all kinds of doubts. Afraid of worldly life, we have become desirous of achieving emancipation. Vasudeva said unto that disciple who had humbly sought his instruction and put the questions duly, who was devoted to his preceptor and possessed of tranquility, and who always behaved in a manner that was agreeable to his instructor, who lived so constantly by the side of his instructor as to have almost become his shadow, who was self-restrained, and who had the life of a yati and brahmacharan, O son of Pritha, that preceptor possessed of intelligence and observant of vows, duly explained all the questions, O foremost one of Kuru's race, O chastiser of all foes. The preceptor said, all this was declared, in days of old, by Brahma himself, the grandsire of all the worlds. Applauded and practiced by the foremost of rishis, and depending on a knowledge of the Vedas, it involves a consideration of what constitutes the real entity. We regard knowledge to be the highest object, and renunciation as the best penance. He who, with certainty, knows the true object of knowledge which is incapable of being modified by circumstances, viz., the soul abiding in all creatures, succeeds in going whithersoever he wishes and comes to be regarded as the highest. That learned man who beholds the residence of all things in one place and their severance as well, and who sees unity in diversity, succeeds in freeing himself from misery. He who does not covet anything and does not cherish the idea of mindness with regard to anything, comes to be regarded, although residing in this world, as identifiable with Brahman. He who is conversant with the truth about the qualities of pradhana, or nature, acquainted with the creation of all existent objects, divested of the idea of mindness, and without pride, succeeds, without doubt, in emancipating himself. Understanding properly that great tree which has the unmanifest for its seed sprout, and the understanding for its trunk, and high consciousness of self for its branches, and the senses for the cells whence its twigs issue, and the 5 great elements for its flower buds, and the gross elements for its smaller boughs, which is always endued with leaves, which always puts forth flowers, and upon which all existent objects depend, whose seed is Brahman, and which is eternal and cutting all topics with the sharp sword of knowledge, one attains to immortality and casts off birth and death. The conclusions with regard to the past, present, and future, etc., and religion, pleasure and wealth, which are all well known to conclaves of siddhas, which appertain to remote cycles, and which are, indeed, eternal, I shall declare to thee, O thou of great wisdom. These constitute what is called good. Men of wisdom, understanding them in this world, attain to success. In days of old, the rishis Vrahaspati and Bharadvaja, and Gautama and Bhargava, and Vasishtha and Kasyapa, and Viswamitra, and Atri, assembled together for the purpose of asking one another. They thus assembled together after having traveled over all paths, and after they had got tired with the acts each of them had done. Those regenerate persons, placing the sage son of Angiras at their head, proceeded to the region of the grandsire. There they beheld Brahma perfectly cleansed of all sin. Bowing their heads unto that high-souled one who was seated at his ease, the great rishis, endued with humility, asked him this grave question regarding the highest good. How should a good man act? How would one be released from sin? What paths are auspicious for us? What is truth, and what is sin? By what action are the two paths, northern and southern, obtained? What is destruction? What is emancipation? What is birth and what is death of all existent objects? I shall tell thee, O disciple, what the grandsire, thus addressed, said unto them, conformably to the Scriptures. Do thou listen? Brahma said, it is from truth that all creatures, mobile and immobile, have been born. They live by penance, of action. Understand this, O ye of excellent vows. In consequence of their own actions they live, transcending their own origin. For truth, when united with qualities, becomes always possessed of 5 indications. Brahman is truth. Penance is truth. Prajapati is truth. It is from truth that all creatures have sprung. Truth is the universe of being. It is for this that Brahmanas who are always devoted to yoga, who have transcended wrath and sorrow, and who always regard religion as the causeway along which everyone must pass for avoiding the morass below, take refuge in truth. I shall now speak of those Brahmanas who are restrained by one another and possessed of knowledge of the orders, and of those who belong to the 4 modes of life. The wise say that religion or duty is one, though, having 4 quarters. Ye regenerate ones, I shall speak to ye now of that path which is auspicious and productive of good. That path has constantly been trod over by men possessed of wisdom in order to achieve an identity with Brahman. I shall speak now of that path which is the highest and which is exceedingly difficult of being understood. Do you understand, in all its details, ye highly blessed ones, what is the highest seat? The first step has been said to be the mode of life that appertains to Brahmacarans. The second step is domesticity. After this is the residence in the woods. After that it should be known is the highest step, viz., that relating to Adhyatma. Light, ether, or space, sun, wind, Indra, and Prajapati, one sees these as long as one does not attain to Adhyatma. I shall declare the means by which that Adhyatma may be attained. Do ye first understand them? The forest mode of life that is followed by ascetics residing in the woods and subsisting upon fruits and roots and air is laid down for the 3 regenerate classes. The domestic mode of life is ordained for all the orders. They that are possessed of wisdom say that religion or duty has faith for its chief indication. Thus have I declared to you the paths leading to the deities. They are adopted by those that are good and wise by their acts. Those paths are the causeways of piety. That person of rigid vows who adopts any one of these modes separately always succeeds in time to understand the production and destruction of all creatures. I shall now declare, accurately and with reasons, the elements which reside in parts in all objects. The great soul, the unmanifest, egoism, consciousness of identity, the 10 in 1 organs, of knowledge and action, the 5 great elements, the specific characteristics of the 5 elements, these constitute the eternal creation. The number of elements has been said to be 24 and 1 more. That person of wisdom who understands the production and destruction of all these elements, that man among all creatures, never meets with delusion. He who understands the elements accurately, all the qualities, all the deities, succeeds in cleansing himself of all sin. Freed from all bonds, such a man succeeds in enjoying all regions of spotless purity. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 36. Brahma said, that which is unmanifest, which is indistinct, all-pervading, everlasting, immutable, should be known to become the city, or mansion, of 9 portals, possessed of 3 qualities, and consisting of 5 ingredients. encompassed by 11, including mind, which distinguishes objects, and having understanding for the ruler. This is an aggregate of 11. The 3 ducts that are in it support it constantly. These are the 3 nadis. They run continually and have the 3 qualities for their essence: darkness, passion, and goodness. These are called the 3 qualities. These are coupled with one another. They exist depending on one another. They take refuge in one another and follow one another. They are also joined with one another. The 5 principal elements are characterized by these 3 qualities. Goodness is the match of darkness. Of goodness, the match is passion. Goodness is also the match of passion, and of goodness the match is darkness. There where darkness is restrained, passion is seen to flow. There where passion is restrained, goodness is seen to flow. Darkness should be known to have the night, or obscurity, for its essence. It has 3 characteristics, and is, otherwise, called delusion. It has unrighteousness, or sin, also for its indication, and it is always present in all sinful acts. This is the nature of darkness, and it appears also as confined with others. Passion is said to have activity for its essence. It is the cause of successive acts. When it prevails, its indication, among all beings, is production. Splendor, lightness, and faith, these are the form, that is light, of goodness among all creatures, as regarded by all good men. The true nature of their characteristics will now be declared by me, with reasons. These shall be stated in aggregation and separation. Do ye understand them? Complete delusion, ignorance, illiberality, indecision in respect of action, sleep, haughtiness, fear, cupidity, grief, censure of good acts, loss of memory, unripeness of judgment, absence of faith, violation of all rules of conduct, want of discrimination, blindness, vileness of behavior, boastful assertions of performance when there has been no performance, presumption of knowledge in ignorance, unfriendliness or hostility, evilness of disposition, absence of faith, stupid reasoning, crookedness, incapacity for association, sinful action, senselessness, stolidity, lassitude, absence of self-control, degradation, all these qualities are known as belonging to darkness. Whatever other states of mind, connected with delusion, exist in the world, all appertain to darkness. Frequent ill-speaking of other people, censuring the deities and the brahmanas, illiberality, vanity, delusion, wrath, unforgiveness, hostility towards all creatures are regarded as the characteristics of darkness. Whatever undertakings exist that are unmeritorious, in consequence of their being vain or useless, what gifts there are that are unmeritorious, in consequence of the unworthiness of the donees, the unreasonableness of the time, the impropriety of the object, etc., vain eating, these also appertain to darkness. Indulgence in calumny, unforgiveness, animosity, vanity, and absence of faith are also said to be characteristics of darkness. Whatever men there are in this world who are characterized by these and other faults of a similar kind, and who break through the restraints provided by the Scriptures, are all regarded as belonging to the quality of darkness. I shall now declare the wombs where these men, who are always of sinful deeds, have to take their birth. Ordained to go to hell, they sink in the order of being. Indeed, they sink into the hell of birth in the brute creation. They become immobile entities, or animals, or beasts of burden, or carnivorous creatures, or snakes, or worms, insects, and birds, or creatures of the oviparous order, or quadrupeds of diverse species, or lunatics, or deaf or dumb human beings, or men that are afflicted by dreadful maladies and regarded as unclean. These men of evil conduct, always exhibiting the indications of their acts, sink in darkness. Their course of migrations is always downwards. Appertaining to the quality of darkness, they sink in darkness. I shall, after this, declare what the means are of their improvement and ascent, indeed, by what means they succeed in attaining to the regions that exist for men of pious deeds. Those men who take birth in orders other than humanity, by growing up in view of the religious ceremonies of Brahmanas, devoted to the duties of their own order and desirous of doing good to all creatures, succeed, through the aid of such purificatory rites, in ascending upwards. Indeed, struggling to improve themselves, they at last attain to the same regions with these pious Brahmanas. Verily, they go to heaven. Even this is the Vedic audition. Born in orders other than humanity and growing old in their respective acts, even thus they become human beings that are, of course, ordained to return. Coming to sinful births and becoming chandalas or human beings that are deaf or that lisp indistinctly, they attain to higher and higher castes, one after another in proper turn, transcending the Sudra order and other consequences of qualities that appertain to darkness and that abide in it in course of migrations in this world. Attachment to objects of desire is regarded as great delusion. Here rishis and munis and deities become deluded, desirous of pleasure. Darkness, delusion, the great obscurity called wrath, and death, that blinding obscurity, these are the 5 great afflictions. As regards wrath, that is the great obscurity, and not aversion or hatred as is sometimes included in the list. With respect then to its color, nature, its characteristics, and its source, I have, ye learned Brahmanas, declared to you, accurately and in due order, everything about the quality of darkness. Who is there that truly understands it? Who is there that truly sees it? That, indeed, is the characteristic of darkness, viz., the beholding of reality in what is not real. The qualities of darkness have been declared to you in various ways. Duly has darkness, in its higher and lower forms, been described to you. That man who always bears in mind the qualities mentioned here will surely succeed in becoming freed from all characteristics that appertain to darkness. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 37. Brahman said, Ye best of beings, I shall now declare to you accurately what the quality of passion is. Ye highly blessed ones, do you understand what those qualities are that appertain to passion, injuring others, beauty, toil, pleasure and pain, cold and heat, lordship or power, war, peace, arguments, dissatisfaction, endurance, might, valor, pride, wrath, exertion, quarrel or collision, jealousy, desire, malice, battle, the sense of meum or mindness, protection of others, slaughter, bonds and affliction, buying and selling, lopping off, cutting, piercing and cutting off the coat of mail that another has worn, fierceness, cruelty, vilifying, pointing out the faults of others, thoughts entirely devoted to worldly affairs, anxiety, animosity, reviling of others, false speech, false or vain gifts, hesitancy and doubt, boastfulness of speech, dispraise and praise, laudation, prowess, defiance, attendance, as on the sick and the weak, obedience to the commands of preceptors and parents, service or ministrations, harboring of thirst or desire, cleverness or dexterity of conduct, policy heedlessness, contumely, possessions, and diverse decorations that prevail in the world among men, women, animals, inanimate things, houses, grief, incredulousness, vows and regulations, actions with expectation of good result, diverse acts of public charity, the rites in respect of svaha salutations, rites of svadha and vashat, officiating at the sacrifices of others, imparting of instruction, performance of sacrifices, study, making of gifts, acceptance of gifts, rites of expiation, auspicious acts, the wish to have this and that, affection generated by the merits of the object for which or whom it is felt, treachery, deception, disrespect and respect, theft, killing, desire of concealment, vexation, wakefulness, ostentation, haughtiness, attachment, devotion, contentment, exultation, gambling, indulgence in scandal, all relations arising out of women, attachment to dancing, instrumental music and songs. All these qualities, ye learned Brahmanas, have been said to belong to passion. Those men on earth who meditate on the past, present, and the future, who are devoted to the aggregate of three, viz., religion, wealth, and pleasure, who, acting from impulse of desire, exult on attaining to affluence in respect of every desire, are said to be enveloped by passion. These men have downward courses. Repeatedly reborn in this world, they give themselves up to pleasure. They covet what belongs to this world, as also all those fruit that belong to the world hereafter. They make gifts, accept gifts, offer oblations to the pitris, and pour libations on the sacrificial fire. The qualities of passion have, thus, been declared to you in their variety. The course of conduct also to which it leads has been properly described to you. The man who always understands these qualities succeeds in always freeing himself from all of them which appertain to passion. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 38. Brahmana said, I shall, after this, discourse to you on that excellent quality which is the third in the order of our enumeration. It is beneficial to all creatures in the world, and unblameable, and constitutes the conduct of those that are good. Joy, satisfaction, nobility, enlightenment, and happiness, absence of stinginess or liberality, absence of fear, contentment, disposition for faith, forgiveness, courage, abstention from injuring any creature, equability, truth, straightforwardness, absence of wrath, absence of malice, purity, cleverness, prowess, these appertain to the quality of goodness. He who is devoted to the duty of yoga, regarding knowledge to be vain, conduct to be vain, service to be vain, and mode of life to be vain, attains to what is highest in the world hereafter. Freedom from the idea of meum, freedom from egoism, freedom from expectations, looking on all with an equal eye, and freedom from desire, these constitute the eternal religion of the good. Confidence, modesty, forgiveness, renunciation, purity, absence of laziness, absence of cruelty, absence of delusion, compassion to all creatures, absence of the disposition to calumniate, exultation, satisfaction, rapture, humility, good behavior, purity in all acts having for their object the attainment of tranquility, righteous understanding, emancipation from attachments, indifference, brahmacharya, complete renunciation, freedom from the idea of meum, freedom from expectations, unbroken observance of righteousness, belief that gifts are vain, sacrifices are vain, study is vain, vows are vain, acceptance of gifts is vain, observance of duties is vain, and penances are vain. Those brahmanas in this world, whose conduct is marked by these virtues, who adhere to righteousness, who abide in the Vedas, are said to be wise and possessed of correctness of vision. Casting off all sins and freed from grief, those men possessed of wisdom attain to heaven and create diverse bodies for themselves. Attaining the power of governing everything, self-restraint, minuteness, these high-souled ones make by operations of their own mind, like the gods themselves dwelling in heaven. Such men are said to have their courses directed upwards. They are veritable gods capable of modifying all things. Attaining to heaven, they modify all things by their very nature. They get whatever objects they desire and enjoy them. Thus have I, ye foremost of regenerate ones, described to you what that conduct is which appertains to the quality of goodness. Understanding these duly, one acquires whatever objects one desires. The qualities that appertain to goodness have been declared particularly. The conduct which those qualities constitute has also been properly set forth. That man who always understands these qualities succeeds in enjoying the qualities without being attached to them. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 39. Brahmana said, the qualities are incapable of being declared as completely separate from one another. Passion and goodness and darkness are seen existing in a state of union. They are attached to one another. They depend on one another. They have one another for their refuge. They likewise follow one another. As long as goodness exists, so long does passion exist. There is no doubt in this. As long as darkness and goodness exist, so long does passion exist. They make their journey together, in union, and moving collectively. They, verily, move in body, when they act with cause or without cause. Of all these which act with one another, however, much they may differ in their development, the manner in which their increase and diminution take place will now be declared. There where darkness exists in an increased measure, in the lower creatures, for example, passion exists in a smaller measure and goodness in a measure that is still less. There where passion exists in a copious measure, and creatures of middle course, darkness exists in a smaller measure and goodness in a measure that is still less. There where goodness exists in a copious measure, and creatures of upward courses, darkness should be known to exist in a small measure and passion in a measure that is still less. Goodness is the spring that causes the modifications of the senses. It is the great enlightener. No duty has been laid down that is higher than goodness. They who abide in goodness proceed upwards. They who abide in passion remain in the middle. They who abide in darkness, being characterized by qualities that are low, sink downwards. Darkness occurs in the Sudra, passion in the Kshatriya, and goodness, which is the highest, in the Brahmana. The three qualities exist even thus in the three orders. Even from a distance, the three qualities of darkness and goodness and passion are seen to exist in a state of union and more collectively. They are never seen in a state of separation. Beholding the sun rising, men of evil deeds become inspired with fear. Travelers on their way become afflicted with heat and suffer distress. The sun is goodness developed, men of evil deeds represent darkness. The heat which travelers on their way feel is said to be a quality of passion. The sun representing light is goodness, the heat is the quality of passion. The shading, or eclipse, of the sun on Parvana days should be known to represent darkness. Even thus, the three qualities exist in all luminous bodies. They act by turns in diverse places in diverse ways. Among immobile objects, the quality of darkness exists in a very large measure. The qualities appertaining to passion are those properties of theirs which undergo constant changes. Their oleaginous attributes appertain to goodness. The day should be understood as threefold. The night has been ordained to be threefold. So also are fortnight, months, years, seasons, and conjunctions. The gifts that are wide are threefold. Threefold is sacrifice that flows. Threefold are the worlds, threefold the deities, threefold is knowledge, and threefold the path or end. The past, the present, and the future, religion, wealth, and pleasure. Prana, apana, and udana, these also are fraught with the three qualities. Whatever object exists in this world, everything in it is fraught with the three qualities. The three qualities act by turns in all things and in all circumstances. Verily, the three qualities always act in an unmanifest form. The creation of those three, viz., goodness, passion, and darkness is eternal. The unmanifest, consisting of the three qualities, is said to be darkness, unperceived, holy, constant. Unborn, womb, eternal. Nature, change or modification, destruction, pradhana, production, and absorption, undeveloped, not small, i.e., vast, unshaking, immovable, fixed, existent, and non-existent. All these names should be known by those who meditate on matters connected with the soul. That person who accurately knows all the names of the unmanifest and the qualities, as also the pure operations of the qualities, is well conversant with the truth about all distinctions and freed from the body, becomes liberated from all the qualities and enjoys absolute happiness. Mahabharata, Book 14, Section 40. Brahmana said, "From the unmanifest first sprang Mahat, the great soul, endued with great intelligence, the source of all the qualities." That is said to be the first creation. The great soul is signified by these synonymous words: the great soul, intelligence, Vishnu, Jishnu, Sambhu of great valor, the understanding, the means of acquiring knowledge, the means of perception, as also fame, courage, and memory. Knowing this, a learned Brahmana has never to encounter delusion. It has hands and feet on every side, it has ears on every side. It stands, pervading everything in the universe. Of great power, that being is stationed in the heart of all. Minuteness, lightness, and affluence are his. He is the Lord of all, and identical with effulgence, and knows not decay. In him are all those who comprehend the nature of the understanding, all those who are devoted to goodness of disposition, all those who practice meditation, who are always devoted to yoga, who are firm in truth, who have subdued their senses, who are possessed of knowledge, who are freed from cupidity, who have conquered wrath, who are of cheerful hearts, who are endued with wisdom, who are liberated from ideas of miyam and tum, and who are devoid of egoism. All these, freed from every kind of attachment, attain to the status of greatness. That person who understands that holy and high goal, viz., the great soul, becomes freed from delusion. The self-born Vishnu becomes the Lord in the primary creations. He who thus knows the Lord lying in the cave, the supreme, ancient being, of universal form, the golden one, the highest goal of all persons endued with understanding, that intelligent man lives, transcending the understanding. Present you by HinduMonastery.com.